Story 1. I'm 32. My name's Jordan. The last time I asked my parents for help, I was 25 and terrified. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind where the sky feels low and heavy, like it wants to smother you. And I'd just been let go from my job at a mid-sized marketing firm that was restructuring, which apparently meant getting rid of people like me so they could outsource half the team and give the CEO a bigger bonus. I wasn't some lazy burnout either. I was good at what I did. I showed up early, stayed late, and hit every deadline they threw at me. But none of that mattered. One meeting, one cold, impersonal HR lady, and I was out just like that. I remember driving to my parents' house that evening, hands shaking on the wheel, thinking, they'll understand. They'll let me crash for a few weeks until I get back on my feet. I hadn't lived at home since I was 20, but they always said, family's family. We help each other. I guess those words came with a footnote I'd never read. When I walked through the door, drenched and carrying my resume folder like some pathetic shield, my mom didn't even look up from her Pilates video. You know, we just turned your room into a gym, right? She said, voice clipped like I just interrupted her dinner. I forced a smile. I don't mind sleeping on the couch. It's just temporary. I got laid off this morning. Dad came around the corner holding a protein shake. You're a grown man, Jordan. Don't come crying to us every time life gets hard. Every time, I asked, stunned. I've never asked you for anything. Not once. He scoffed. Exactly. And it's worked fine that way. Don't start now. I stood there dripping onto their hardwood floor, still in my work slacks, with that lump in my throat that's part heartbreak, part humiliation. I should have begged. I should have gotten angry. But instead, I just nodded and said, got it. That was the last real conversation I had with them for 7 years. I slept in my car for 3 weeks. A 2006 Honda Civic with one working window and a heater that only worked when I drove. I parked behind a 24-hour diner near the outskirts of town. I'd sneak in during slow hours, order a cup of coffee, and use their bathroom to clean up. The night manager, a woman named Cynthia with the kindest eyes I've ever seen, figured it out after the second week. She never said anything, but she started slipping me leftover muffins at closing and asking if I wanted to use the staff shower. I swallowed every bit of pride I had. I worked day jobs, handing out flyers, moving furniture, delivering groceries, whatever I could get. Slowly, painfully, I scraped together enough to rent a dingy studio apartment the size of a closet. Mold in the corners, creaky pipes, and a view of a brick wall. But it was mine. My mattress sat on the floor, and my kitchen was a hot plate and a sink. But I'd never felt prouder. By month 5, I had a plan. Rebuild brick by brick, quietly, and with the kind of focus that comes from being pushed so low there's nowhere to look but up. I spent nights taking online courses in finance and business analytics. I'd always been good with numbers, the kind of kid who organized his Halloween candy by candy type and expiration date. I started doing freelance spreadsheet work for small companies. One job turned into 2, then 5. I reinvested everything, bought better software, learned about investing, budgeting, and how the banking system actually worked. By year 2, I had enough clients to register my own financial consulting business. I worked out of a corner of my new apartment, slightly less moldy, and ran everything myself. Taxes, emails, consultations. I wore cheap suits and pretended I had an assistant named Melissa who'd respond to clients. It was just me using a different email address. I don't know if it was desperation or sheer stubbornness, but I treated that business like my oxygen. I couldn't afford to fail. Fast forward to year 4. I got a call from a local bank manager I'd met at a networking event. He said, "You've built something impressive, Jordan. We're opening a new branch and need someone sharp to oversee our personal loan division." Interested. Took everything in me not to scream. I kept my voice steady. I'd love to learn more. By the time I turned 30, I was managing a mid-sized branch with a sleek office, an assistant of my own, an actual person this time, and enough money in savings to never sleep in a car again. I even bought a condo. Not huge, but modern, clean, and quiet. My parents never called, not once. No birthday cards. No, "How are you doing?" Nothing. But I saw them. I watched their Facebook posts, new furniture, vacations, dinners with my brother. They had the money to buy a treadmill and a fancy mirror for their home gym, but not a cent for their son when he was sleeping under streetlights. And yet I wasn't angry. Not in the fiery, scream into a pillow kind of way. I was something worse. I was cold. I didn't hate them. I just didn't care anymore. That bond, that unbreakable thread between child and parent, had frayed and snapped quietly, like a string pulled too tight. Then, about 6 months ago, something strange happened. I was sitting at my desk going over approval reports for mid-sized loan applicants when my assistant poked her head in. "You have a walk-in? No appointment, but they say it's urgent." "Names?" I asked, distracted. She hesitated. Richard and Linda Barrett." I froze. I hadn't heard those names in years, not out loud. I stood up slowly, walked over to the one-way glass window behind my desk, and looked into the waiting area. There they were. My father, slightly graying, flipping through a brochure with that same impatient tapping of his knee. My mother, arms folded, lips pursed in that disapproving look she wore like perfume. They were dressed nice, not flashy, but clearly still living in their little suburban kingdom. I turned back toward my desk, heart pounding. They didn't recognize my name, of course. Not Jordan Whitmore, loan officer. I dropped my last name from everything when I incorporated my business. They thought they were walking into a regular bank, talking to some faceless cog in a machine. But today I was the machine. I smoothed my jacket, adjusted my collar, and said to my assistant, "Send them in, but don't tell them my name." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. I walked to the other side of my office and waited by the window, back turned, pretending to review some file. I heard the door open, footsteps. Then, "Mr. Whitmore." My mother's voice, polite, measured, almost deferential. I turned slowly, letting them see my face 1 second before I spoke. "Hello, Mom. Dad." They both froze. My father's mouth opened, then shut again. My mother blinked like she'd just seen a ghost. "Jordan," she finally whispered. I didn't answer. I just gestured toward the 2 chairs across from my desk. "Please have a seat." They sat down like they were sinking into quicksand. My dad cleared his throat, trying to regain his usual bravado. "We didn't realize you worked here." "No," I said calmly, folding my hands on the desk. "I imagine you didn't." There was a long silence. My mom kept looking around the office, like maybe this was a prank or maybe someone else named Jordan would walk in and clear things up. But I just waited, let them squirm. I wasn't interested in a reunion. I wanted to see if they'd say it, if they'd ask or apologize. Finally, my dad leaned forward. "Look, son, this is awkward, I know, but we're in a bit of a situation." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" He gave a tight nod. "We had some investments fall through. The market's been rough. Your mother's medical bills. Your niece's surgery was elective." My mother cut in quickly, like she was worried he'd say too much. "But the insurance didn't cover everything." "And," I held up a hand, "why don't you tell me exactly why you're here?" They looked at each other, then back at me. "We need a loan," my dad said. "A sizable one." "How sizable?" I asked, tapping the keyboard in front of me as if I were taking notes. $220,000, he said, "to refinance the house and cover some outstanding debts." I didn't flinch, but inside I laughed quietly, bitterly. The same house they refused to let me sleep in. The house they chose to fill with exercise equipment instead of their son. "I see," I said. "And what collateral do you have?" "The house," my mother said quickly. "It's still in our name. We've owned it for 30 years. I nodded, clicked through a few imaginary tabs on my screen. "Income," my dad shifted in his seat. "Social Security, some retirement, but it's not much. That's why we need the loan." Things got tight faster than we expected. I glanced up. "Any children listed as co-signers?" Another pause. My mom looked down. My dad stared past me. "We asked your brother," she said eventually. "But he's going through his own problems." That was Rich. My brother Kyle, the golden child, the one they always said made them proud. He'd bounced from failed startup to failed startup for years, each time emerging with a fresh excuse and an Instagram post about entrepreneurial resilience, but they always bailed him out. Always. He was trying. I was too sensitive. He was just figuring life out. I was dramatic. They didn't ask me for help until they were forced to. Not because they wanted to. Not because they thought I could help. Just because I was the only one left. I leaned back in my chair. Let the silence hang there. Let the weight of their choices settle into the stale air between us. I have to say, I finally said, keeping my voice even, it's remarkable how life works. What do you mean? My mother asked. I continued. That's 7 years ago. I stood in your doorway after losing my job. The same job that paid my rent, my food, my everything, and asked for a couch. Not money. Not even a bed. A couch. My dad tensed. We were trying to teach you responsibility. You told me not to cry to you like a child. I interrupted. Then you turned my room into a gym. I slept in a Civic behind a diner for 3 weeks. I had nothing. My mom's eyes started to glisten. Jordan, we didn't know it was that bad. No, I said, voice sharper now. You didn't ask. You didn't care to find out. They sat in silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the powerless one. I wasn't the scared kid asking for scraps. I was the man they turned away, the one they forgot, and now the one they needed. My dad cleared his throat again. Look, we're sorry. If we could go back, we would... What? I asked. Give me a pillow and a blanket on the floor? Let me stay for a week. Neither of them answered. I glanced at the file I'd opened. Their names, their address, their credit score, which I'll admit I had already looked up the moment I saw them in the waiting area. This isn't a guaranteed approval, I said flatly. Not with your debt ratio. But... My mother started, desperate now. But there must be something you can do. You're in charge, right? That was the moment. That split second where the world felt like it had flipped upside down. The woman who once rolled her eyes at my struggles, now sitting across from me, hands trembling, voice cracking, begging. I steepled my fingers, took a deep breath, and then, just as my dad opened his mouth to speak, my office phone rang. I answered with a clipped, professional tone. Jordan Whitmore, Personal Loan Division. Yes, they're here now. I glanced at my parents, still wide-eyed, frozen. Yes, I said slowly into the receiver. Tell the regional manager. I'll need an extra 15 minutes. Then I hung up and leaned forward, because this conversation, it was only just beginning. My mom's voice was barely above a whisper. Regional manager? I didn't answer. I let the weight of the title sit there, filling the room like fog. It was the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not anger, not annoyance. Fear, the kind that comes from realizing the person you thought would always be beneath you, is now towering over you in silence. My dad, stubborn as ever, sat back in his chair and crossed his arms like a petulant teenager. We're not here to dig up the past, Jordan. You have a good job now. Clearly, we just need help. Families help each other. Funny, I said. That line sounds familiar. But when I said it, I was a grown man who needed to figure things out on his own. That was different, he grumbled. No, I replied. It really wasn't. My mother tried to smile, though it faltered fast. Sweetheart, we made mistakes. I admit it. But things were complicated back then. We thought we were pushing you to be stronger, to stand on your own. You thought throwing me out was tough love? I said. You thought letting me sleep in my car while you redecorated my childhood room was going to build character? Well, it did. It built something. But it wasn't love. It was distance. It was silence. It was the reason I never called again. She looked down, her fingers twisting in her lap like she was wringing out guilt. For a second, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered that first night in the car, the cold leather sticking to my skin, the way I held my resume against the passenger window to block the street lamp so I could try and sleep, the feeling of waking up to condensation and regret, and the realization that my own parents, the people who'd always preached about loyalty and family unity, didn't care if I disappeared. My dad shifted again, trying to find some moral high ground. You're not perfect either. You could have called us. We didn't hear from you for years. You didn't call me either, I replied. And the door swings both ways. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Just a sigh. Maybe he knew by now the old tactics wouldn't work. I wasn't a kid sitting at the dinner table waiting for their approval. I was the man across the desk, the one with the power to approve or deny the lifeline they were now begging for. So I said, breaking the tension, "What exactly do you plan to do if this loan is denied?" They both looked at me, startled. My mom stammered, "I don't know. We were hoping you'd understand." "I do understand," I said, nodding. "More than you think." I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out across the parking lot. It was raining lightly now, soft taps against the glass, almost poetic. 7 years ago, I had stood outside their house in the same weather, watching the lights turn off, the curtains close, like I was invisible. Now, they were the ones hoping not to be ignored. I turned back to them. "You should know something. I've never told anyone this, not even my assistant. But the day I got the job here, I drove past the house just once. I parked across the street for 5 minutes. You were having a barbecue. Kyle was there. Everyone was laughing. You had balloons tied to the fence. My mother blinked fast, her mascara starting to smudge. You didn't even notice me. And I remember thinking, maybe it's better that way. Maybe this chapter is done." "Jordan," she said, voice trembling. "Please, we're your parents." "No," I replied calmly. "You're strangers who raised me." That line hit harder than I expected. Even my father flinched, and for a moment, the room fell into a vacuum of silence, so thick it felt like time had stopped. Then came the knock at the door. My assistant peeked in. "Mr. Whitmore, your next appointment's waiting." I nodded. "Tell them I'll be right out." She glanced at my parents, eyes wide with awkward curiosity, then closed the door again. I walked back behind the desk, sat down, folded my hands again. "I'll have to review your application thoroughly," I said, returning to the robotic professionalism I knew would burn them the most. "Given your credit history and income situation, I can't make any promises. The system has protocols, guidelines." "Jordan," my dad started, but his voice cracked. "We'll lose the house." I leaned forward slightly. "Then maybe next time someone knocks on your door in the rain, you'll think twice before turning them away." I let that hang there, heavy, final. Then I stood. "This meeting is over for now. My assistant will call you with any updates." My mom stood slowly, tears in her eyes, searching my face for any sliver of the boy they used to know. But I didn't flinch. I didn't hug her. I didn't say I love you because I didn't feel it. Not anymore. They shuffled out of the room like ghosts. Pale, hollow, forgotten. And as the door clicked shut behind them, I sat down again, heart pounding, not from anger, but from a strange, quiet kind of peace. And then, just as I exhaled, my assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Whitmore, your next appointment is ready." Cleared my throat. "Send them in." But I didn't open the file on my desk. Not yet, because there was still one more thing I needed to do. Something I'd been waiting years to say, but that would have to wait until the final decision. And trust me, I already knew what it would be. I didn't sleep that night. Not much anyway. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the city outside my window keeping me company. My apartment wasn't lavish, but it was mine. Sleek, minimal, clean. The air didn't smell like disappointment or old gym socks. There were no passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. No footsteps down the hall that made my chest tighten. It was peace. Hard-earned, fragile peace, but it felt unsettled now. That old wound, the one I'd sealed shut with silence and self-discipline, had been ripped open by their sudden appearance. I'd spent years pretending I didn't care. Now they sat in my head like squatters. At 2:14 a.m., I got up, walked to my desk, and opened their loan file again. I didn't need to. I already knew what was in it. Late credit card payments, a second mortgage, Kyle's name on 3 co-signed debts that had defaulted, The gym equipment they'd bought for my old room maxed out on a store card they never paid off, and the retirement fund dwindling fast, drained by vanity projects and poor planning. It was all there, line after line of self-inflicted damage. They didn't need a loan. They needed a miracle. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. My instincts told me to walk away, let the system handle it. Deny the application and let it be a clean, cold consequence. They'd made their choices, but part of me wasn't ready to let go just yet. Not until they understood. Not until I said everything I'd wanted to say for 7 long years. The next morning, I called my assistant and told her to block off the last 2 hours of my day. Personal matter, I said. She didn't ask questions. At 3:30 p.m., I called their number. My mom answered on the second ring. Her voice was tight, tired. Hello. Hi, it's Jordan. A pause, then, oh hi, sweetheart. Thank you for calling. We've been waiting. I reviewed your application, I said. Can you come in today at 5? Yes. Yes, of course, she said quickly. We'll be there. They arrived early, dressed nicer than before. My dad was wearing a navy blazer I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. My mom had her hair done and carried a small leather folder like she was trying to look professional. They were putting on a show. Too late for that. I gestured for them to sit, then pulled out the file. I went through your finances, I said. To be honest, it's not good. They both nodded solemnly. You're carrying too much debt. Your credit score is in the low 600s. Your income doesn't support the payments for a loan that size. Under normal circumstances, this would be denied without hesitation. My mom's eyes welled up. We know, she whispered. We made mistakes. I kept going. But these aren't just financial mistakes. They're personal ones, emotional ones. And I'm not talking about your spending. They looked up, startled. I came to you once, I said. Once, not for money, not for anything beyond a roof. And you made it clear that your comfort mattered more than your son. Jordan, my dad started, but I didn't let him speak. I worked. I starved. I clawed my way out of that car. Every bit of success I have now I earned alone. And the only thing I wanted more than stability was an apology. My mom looked down. My dad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. So, here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm going to approve the loan under one condition. Their eyes lit up. Anything, my mom said quickly. Of course. I pulled out a sheet of paper. This is a binding agreement. It states that the loan will be interest-free, to be repaid over 20 years. It also includes a clause that you'll list me as co-owner of the house. That way, if you default, I can sell it to recover the loss. My dad blinked. You want to own our house? No, I said. I don't want it. I just don't trust you not to burn it down out of pride. If you're serious about this, you'll agree. My mother took the pen, hands trembling. She didn't even look at my dad for permission. She signed. But I wasn't done. There's one more condition, I said, pulling out a second sheet of paper. This one was handwritten. What's this? She asked. Your apology, I replied. I want it in writing. A letter, each of you. No excuses. No justifications. No. We were trying to teach you. Just the truth. That you failed me. That you abandoned me. That you're sorry. My dad stared at me like I'd slapped him. You can keep the money, I said quietly. But you don't get to rewrite the past. I won't grovel, he growled. You already are, I said. But if your pride means more than your mortgage, walk away now. My mom started crying quietly. Not the performative sobs she used to weaponize. This was different, real, raw. She took the paper and began writing. My father stared at her for a long time. Then slowly he picked up the pen. I watched them both write in silence. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. When they finished, they handed me the letters. I read them later at home. They weren't perfect. My dad's was clipped and formal, barely a page. My mom's was longer, more emotional. She wrote about the day I left. About the guilt that grew every time she passed by my empty room. About how she followed my career online. silently cheering me on from a distance she was too ashamed to close. I folded the letters, put them in an envelope, and locked them in a drawer. The loan went through the next day. They never missed a payment. Over the next few years, our relationship didn't magically heal. We weren't suddenly a happy family, but we talked occasionally. They sent holiday cards. I invited them to a work event once. They came, stayed quiet, and left early. That was enough. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about drawing a line, about proving to yourself that the past doesn't define your worth. And sometimes the best revenge isn't slamming the door. It's opening it again, just wide enough for them to see the life they no longer get to be part of. And that, I've learned, is more powerful than any no I could have given. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My name's Kai, and I'm 33 now. But this story starts when I was just 13 years old. The day my life split into two timelines. The one my parents thought they were writing, and the one I quietly lived instead. I was left at a gas station off I-70, just outside of Columbus, Ohio. The last words my mother said before the car door slammed shut were, "Maybe now you'll learn not to be a burden." Then the taillights faded into the distance like nothing happened. I stood there in an oversized hoodie and ripped sneakers, gripping a warm soda I hadn't even paid for yet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited for 5 minutes, then 10, then an hour until I realized this wasn't some kind of sick lesson or bluff. They were gone for real. You probably think something huge must have happened for them to abandon their only son like that. But the truth? I got a C+ on my math test, and we were running late for my dad's weekend golf trip. That's it. That was enough to push me from unwanted to expendable. My parents had always walked that line with me. Passive-aggressive comments, ignored birthdays, punishments for things I didn't even do. But this was different. This was a decision, a deliberate, clean break. And I understood in that moment that I wasn't going home again. I wandered inside the gas station, unsure what I was even supposed to do. The cashier, a tired-looking guy named Tom with a mullet and smudged glasses, looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Your folks take off?" he asked casually, like it was normal. I nodded. He sighed, muttered something about calling child services, but I cut him off. "Can I use your bathroom first?" I needed space, just 5 minutes alone, to think. I locked the door behind me, sat on the cold tile floor, and made the first decision of my real life. I was going to disappear. You have to understand, I didn't hate my parents. Not then. Not yet. I just felt empty, like a piece of luggage that had been forgotten at the terminal. It wasn't anger that moved me forward. It was the numb realization that if I stayed still, someone would come and shove me back into a system I didn't trust. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I ran out the back door of that gas station, through the lot, into the woods behind it, and just kept going until my legs gave out. The next few years were a blur. Shelters, odd jobs, sleeping in church basements, sometimes on rooftops in the summer. I learned how to survive. I made friends who didn't ask questions, people who taught me things you won't find in any school. I lied about my age. I worked under the table. I kept my head down. And every once in a while, late at night, I'd pull out the crumpled piece of paper with my parents' number on it, the one I memorized before it disintegrated from rain, and I'd wonder what they told people. That I ran away? That I was a lost cause? Or did they erase me completely like a bad investment? At 17, I got lucky. I met an old mechanic named Reggie who owned a rundown auto shop and needed help lifting parts. He didn't care that I didn't have papers or a last name I wanted to use. He handed me a broom and said, "You clean, you eat." And that was the start. He became something like a father to me in the quiet way good men do. Never with big speeches, just by showing up every day and trusting me with small things until they grew bigger. With his help, I got a GED, then trade school. Eventually, I got certified, opened my own mobile repair van, and slowly built a life. Not a flashy one, but mine. I never used my real name. Not until I was in my 30s and the fear started to fade. I still had no social media, no digital footprint, no real connections to the world my parents lived in. So, when I woke up 3 weeks ago to 29 missed calls from an unknown number, and 3 voicemails that made my stomach drop, It felt like a ghost had clawed its way out of the grave. The voice was unmistakable. My mother, older, raspier, but still with that cool tone like she was doing me a favor just by speaking. Kai, we really need to speak with you. It's important. Your father isn't well. Call me back. The second message was more clipped. I know you're angry, but we didn't know what else to do. We've been trying to find you for years. And the third one, it was my father coughing mid-sentence, wheezing like he'd smoked through the apocalypse. Kid, it's Dad. If you get this, please, we need your help. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to make sense of it. They needed something. Of course, they did. That much hadn't changed. But what stunned me wasn't the calls. It was how they found me. I'd been careful, obsessively so. No real address, no credit cards, nothing that would ever connect me back to them. But I'd let my guard down once. I'd used my real name on a permit application when renewing my mobile van license. That was all it took. I don't know how they got a hold of it or who pointed them my way, but they had found me, after 20 years. I didn't call back right away. Couldn't. I stared at my phone for hours, listening to the messages over and over until I felt sick. Part of me wanted to scream, to rage, to finally unload the weight of being thrown away like garbage. But another part, the colder, more calculating one I'd built to survive, wanted to know what they were after. Because it wasn't love, it wasn't closure. It never had been. The next day, I got a knock on my workshop door. Not a call, not a letter, a knock. And when I opened it, I saw her. My mother, older, thinner, wearing a designer coat that didn't match the tiredness in her eyes. Her hands trembled. Her expression softened when she saw me, like she was preparing to cry, but hadn't earned the right to. And standing behind her was a man I didn't recognize at first, until he coughed. My father. They looked like ruins of the people I remembered. Fragile, exhausted, like they'd aged in a way no makeup or good posture could hide. Kai! My mother whispered. Please, just hear us out. I didn't say a word. I didn't step back. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there with my hand still on the doorknob and my pulse climbing in my throat as the storm I'd buried for 20 years finally reached the surface. And just before I could speak, just as I opened my mouth, my mother pulled something from her purse. A letter? No, not a letter, a contract. It's not what you think, she said quickly, eyes darting to my father, who looked like he wanted to lie down right there on the sidewalk. It's about the house and the trust. You're our only chance. I blinked and laughed because of course it was. And that's when I realized they weren't here to apologize. They were here because they needed me. And for the first time in my life, they were the ones standing on my doorstep. I didn't invite them in. Not right away. I just stood there in the doorway of my small workshop, with its half-rusted sign and concrete floors still stained from last week's transmission job, staring at the people who left me behind like I was nothing more than a mistake. My mother held the folder close to her chest like it was some kind of peace offering. I could see her mouth working silently, like she was rehearsing lines she'd practiced in the mirror all the way here. My father leaned on the side of the building, a little out of breath, his face pale and drawn beneath the grizzle of unshaven stubble. He wasn't doing well. That part wasn't a lie. But sympathy wasn't something they'd ever earned from me. I think you've got the wrong person, I said finally, voice low. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, just those words. But my mother's reaction, it caught me off guard. Her shoulders sagged, her hands started to shake, and her eyes welled up with tears that didn't fall. No, she whispered. You're not going to do this. Not after everything we've been through to find you. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I didn't want them seeing the life I'd built. Didn't want them stepping 1 inch into the space I'd made for myself. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and they didn't deserve to even breathe the air inside it. Everything you've been through? I asked. That's a funny way of framing it. My father coughed, a deep rattling sound that didn't seem to stop until he leaned forward with one hand bracing the wall. He's dying, my mother said suddenly, desperate now. Lung cancer, stage 4, the treatments, the debt. There it was. Debt. Not regret, not guilt, not even a real apology, just a number with a $sign in front of it. I stared at them both, almost detached. It felt surreal, like I was watching two strangers playing dress-up as my parents. I hadn't heard their voices in 20 years, and now they were using them to ask for help, for money. How long did it take after you left me at that gas station? I asked softly. How long before you stopped checking the news? Before you told people I ran away? My mother flinched like I'd slapped her. I was 13, I continued, my voice sharper now, slicing through the sticky summer air. You dumped me like a piece of trash because I got a C+ and made you late for golf. We panicked, she said, her voice cracking. We thought you'd come back. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe she still thought that was a defense. You drove away. That's not panic. That's a choice. My father shifted, trying to speak, but only managed a rasp whisper. You were always so difficult. Difficult, I repeated, stunned. Because I didn't want to play tennis? Because I asked questions? Because I existed? He didn't answer, just looked away, ashamed, or maybe just annoyed that I wasn't making this easy. My mother took a slow step forward. She looked different, older, more brittle, but her voice, still rehearsed, still calculating. Kai, please. The house is in foreclosure. We mortgaged it twice, trying to pay for his treatment. We have nothing left, but there's a trust your grandfather set up. It was locked until you turned 35, but there's a clause that lets you unlock it early if both parents sign off, and if you agree to act as a caretaker. I blinked. Wait, a trust? What trust? She hesitated. Then, as if trying to regain control, she held out the document. Your grandfather, my father, he left it for you. Only you. He didn't trust us. But the clause says if we're both in critical need and you agree to sign on as family caregiver, you can access it 5 years early. It would save the house and your father's life. I didn't take the folder. I didn't even look at it. Instead, I studied her. The way her fingers twitched. The way she kept glancing behind me like she wanted to peer into my life to measure what I'd become. And that's when it hit me. They weren't just desperate. They were surprised. Surprised I was still standing. That I wasn't in jail or dead. That I hadn't turned into the failure they predicted. Let me get this straight, I said quietly. You left me with nothing. You didn't report me missing. You told people I ran away. You never tried to find me. And now, 20 years later, when the walls are closing in on you, suddenly, you remember your son exists. My mother's face hardened. Her tears vanished like they were never real to begin with. We didn't come here for a fight, Kai. This isn't about the past. It's about survival. No, I said. It's only about the past. Everything in my life since 13 has been built on surviving what you did. And now you want to cash that in like I'm some kind of investment. Behind me, the sound of a car engine pulled into the lot. It was Lenny, my coworker, early for his shift. I could see him glance curiously at the scene unfolding, but I gave a subtle shake of my head. He didn't approach. I'll think about it, I said finally. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either because part of me wanted to know more about the trust, about the grandfather I barely remembered. And part of me, the broken part, the still bleeding 13-year-old inside, wanted them to sweat. We'll be at the motel off 43, my mother said quietly. Room 217. They left without another word. And as I stood there watching their car disappear down the same highway they abandoned me on, something strange flickered inside me. Not anger, not pity, something colder, something that wanted to see how far they'd fall and whether they'd beg before they broke. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the small cot in the back of my workshop, staring at the ceiling, the whir of the old ceiling fan doing little to distract me from the war inside my head. My phone buzzed a few times, unknown number again. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled open the drawer beside my cot and retrieved an old shoebox I hadn't touched in years. Inside were a few artifacts from a life I no longer claimed. A bent library card from middle school, a faded photo of me at 9 holding a science fair trophy, and a folded page I had once ripped from my school yearbook. I looked at the boy in the photo, me with a crooked smile and that same old hoodie I wore the day they left me behind. I remembered how excited I was to show them that science trophy. I had waited by the front door for 2 hours with it in my hands until the housekeeper told me they weren't coming home that night. Some charity gala or investment dinner. I didn't even cry back then. Just quietly went to bed with the trophy in my arms like it could make up for the silence. And now they wanted me to save them. The next morning, I showered, shaved, and threw on a clean shirt. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I didn't want them to see anything they could twist into weakness. I drove out to the motel. Not the nice kind with free breakfast and fake plants in the lobby. This was the kind with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. Room 217. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. My mother must have been standing just on the other side, waiting. She looked surprised to see me dressed well, holding coffee and not dragging a chip on my shoulder. My father was propped up in bed behind her, oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. His skin had turned that sickly yellow-gray and his eyes were sunken, glassy. I didn't feel sorry. I just noted it like a mechanic diagnosing a car with too many problems to fix. "I brought you this," I said, handing her the extra coffee. "Don't read into it." She took it carefully. "Thank you." I sat down in the worn armchair by the window. She sat opposite me, and for a long moment we didn't speak. Then I broke the silence. "Tell me everything, the real version. No rehearsed lines." My mother blinked. Then she nodded like she'd been waiting for that challenge. "My father," she began, "was a hard man, cold, worse than your father in some ways. But he loved control more than anything. He didn't trust anyone. When I told him I was pregnant, he told me straight to my face that if the child turned out to be anything less than perfect, he'd disown me. He kept his word." She looked out the window. "When you were born, he saw something in you. I don't know what, he never told me. But by the time you were 5, he had set up a trust. I didn't know the details until years later. But the core of it was simple. It's yours and only yours. And you'd only get access if you stayed clean, legal, and unreachable until you were 35. No crimes, no addictions, no scandals. He wanted to test your resilience, as he put it." I raised an eyebrow. "So he designed it like a loyalty test?" She nodded. "He didn't trust us. Not me, not your father. We were spending more than we had, and he knew it. So he locked the money behind a wall we couldn't touch. But he put in that clause that if you agreed to become our legal caretaker in case of terminal illness, and if we both signed a waiver, you could access it 5 years early." My stomach twisted. It wasn't the money, it was the manipulation, even from the grave. "And how much is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "A little over 700,000. Silence again. That number rang in my ears. Not because I wanted it, but because it was more than they'd ever given me in love, attention, or safety combined. I looked at my father. He wasn't listening. He was asleep now or pretending to be. I wondered if he even knew where he was. If he remembered the gas station. If he remembered the look on my face when he drove off. "Why didn't you ever come back?" I asked suddenly. My mother flinched. "I did," she whispered. 3 days later, I drove back. I waited at that station for hours. But you were gone and I didn't know what to do. 3 days, I repeated. "You waited 3 days?" Her hands clenched around the coffee cup. "I told myself it was for your own good," she said, her voice thin and brittle. "That you were better off without us. That you'd find a family who deserved you. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Ashamed and scared. I didn't want to tell people what we'd done. So, I let the lie stand." I stared at her, trying to read between the lines. But there was nothing left to read. Just silence, desperation, and the pathetic, wilted remains of 2 people who had once ruled my life. And now here they were, asking me to sign something that would erase the past. Not in their minds, but in the legal system. I stood up. "I'll think about it," I said, but I already knew the answer. I just hadn't decided how I wanted to deliver it. Back at the shop, I pulled the papers out of the envelope she had snuck into my van. My name was there, my real name, the one I hadn't used in 20 years. The clause was real. The money was real. The terms were sickeningly clear. And there, scribbled in the margins, was a note in her handwriting. You're our only hope. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone, not to call them, but to call someone else. A lawyer. Because if they thought I was going to walk into this trap without a net of my own, they hadn't learned anything at all. I didn't call them back right away. I met with the lawyer first. Her name was Maya Rios, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney recommended to me by a friend in town who'd gone through a brutal inheritance dispute of his own. She didn't ask too many questions when I told her I hadn't seen my parents in 2 decades. Just raised her eyebrows when I handed over the documents. She flipped through the papers in silence for nearly 20 minutes. Then she closed the folder slowly, took off her glasses, and leaned back. "Well," she said, "they definitely didn't think you'd have representation." I gave a dry laugh. "That sounds like them. They've played this smart," she said. "But not clean. The trust language is airtight, but the clause about critical illness and caretaker status, that's open to interpretation if challenged in probate court. But if you sign this," she tapped the last page with her index finger, "you legally bind yourself as their dependent caretaker, which means once that's signed, they get everything they want. Full access to your trust, and you get saddled with legal obligations you may not want." "Even if I never take a cent?" I asked. "Doesn't matter. The moment you sign, they can argue that you're acting on their behalf. It would be nearly impossible to contest later." She leaned forward. "You'd lose control. And I have a feeling that's something you haven't let happen in a long time." I nodded slowly. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't want their forgiveness. I didn't want reconciliation. I didn't even want the money, really. I wanted peace. And peace for me meant knowing they'd never be able to manipulate me again. Never twist the narrative. Never look me in the eye and say, "See, we raised a good kid after all." They didn't raise me. I raised myself. The next day, I drove to the motel again, but I didn't go alone. Maya came with me. She wore a sleek blazer, carried a briefcase, and had a calm fire in her voice that made grown men sweat in depositions. My parents didn't expect her. My mother opened the door, her expression brightening slightly when she saw me, and then flickering with confusion when Maya stepped up beside me. "This is my attorney," I said simply. My mother blinked. "You're what?" "Don't worry," Maya said smoothly, stepping inside before they could react. "We're just here to clarify some things. If everyone's acting in good faith, this shouldn't be a problem." My father was sitting up in bed, wearing a thin oxygen tube and the same stained shirt from 2 days ago. He looked worse now, sunken, hollow, distant. He stared at me like he wasn't entirely sure I was real. Maya opened her briefcase, pulled out a few documents, and began speaking in calm, measured tones. "My client has reviewed the proposed agreement. While we understand the urgency of your situation, we found some concerning language in the caretaker clause. As such, Mr. Ellis will not be signing the agreement as written." My mother's lips thinned. "Then what are we even doing here?" "We're offering an alternative," Maya said. "Kai is willing to waive his claim to the trust entirely. However, we're filing a restraining order effective immediately, along with a public affidavit stating the full circumstances surrounding his abandonment at age 13. This will be submitted to the trust's original administrative board. If you attempt to access the trust under fraudulent pretenses, you'll be committing perjury, and we will pursue charges." I watched the blood drain from my mother's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "You don't get to rewrite the story," I said. "You left me. You didn't come back. And now you're looking for a lifeline you never earned." Her voice cracked. "You'd really do that? Let your father die just to prove a point?" I stepped closer, calm as ice. "No," I said. "He's going to die either way. I'm just making sure he doesn't die thinking he got away with it." My father finally spoke, his voice weak but bitter. "You always were dramatic. And you always were a coward," I said. "I got good at reading people, Dad. You know why? Because I spent years wondering what I did wrong. And then I realized I didn't do anything wrong. I was just inconvenient, an obstacle. And when I got old enough to ask questions, you didn't like the mirror I held up." My mother's hands were trembling now. "Please, Kai, we're your family." "No," I said. "You were my family. Now you're just two people I used to know. Maya gathered the papers and handed them a copy of the affidavit. My mother tried to tear it in half, but her hands were too shaky. She just crumpled it in her lap and looked away. As we turned to leave, I paused at the door. There's something else, I said. You told people I ran away, that I was a troubled kid. You never filed a missing person report. That lie followed me my whole life. I got turned away from shelters, hospitals, jobs because I had no record, no history. You erased me. My mother opened her mouth, but no sound came out. So, I've already contacted the police, I continued. I told them my full story. There's an investigation opening into the abandonment of a minor. Statute of limitations might not cover everything, but at the very least, you'll have to answer some questions. On record. You're bluffing, my father rasped. I looked at Maya. She pulled out a second folder. Here's the case number, she said. You'll be hearing from a detective next week. We left. They didn't try to stop us. Outside, the sun was high and the air smelled like hot asphalt and old motel chlorine. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had finally slid off my shoulders. Back at the workshop, I closed early. I took the rest of the day off and drove to the park near the edge of town. The one with the rusted jungle gym and the broken swing set. I used to sleep there some nights, curled up under the slide with a knife in my pocket and one eye open. I sat on the same bench I used to sit on when I was 15, watching families walk by, pretending one of them might notice me. Now no one needed to. I was no longer invisible. I hadn't just survived them. I'd outlived them, outgrown them, outsmarted them. A week later, I got the official letter from the trust board. The inheritance was still in place, but now frozen indefinitely until the board reviewed my legal challenge. My parents wouldn't get a cent. 2 weeks after that, I received another letter. This time handwritten with no return address. It was from my mother. It said 3 things. I'm sorry. You ruined us. Please don't come to the funeral. I folded the letter and placed it in the shoebox with the rest of my past. And I didn't go, because I had already buried them the day they left me at that gas station. The rest? That was just cleanup. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I'm Alex, 32 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I was doing the right thing by taking care of my family. I'm not a flashy guy. I work in cybersecurity, and while the job is demanding, it pays well enough that I've been able to live comfortably and help out my parents here and there. At first, it was small stuff. Groceries, a new washer, covering a few surprise bills. They were grateful back then. Or maybe I just wanted to believe they were. Last year, I got a big bonus, 6 figures, a combination of long hours, good timing, and a successful project that landed our firm a major client. When I told my parents, they were proud, or at least they acted like it. My mom got teary, hugged me, said I was her miracle kid, and my dad gave one of those stiff shoulder pats that pass for affection in our family. They didn't ask for anything, but I knew they were struggling with the mortgage on the house. Retirement hadn't gone the way they'd hoped, and I figured if I could lift that weight off their backs, maybe they'd finally get a break. So I did it, paid off the mortgage in full. Quietly, no grand announcement, no strings. I even sent them on a 2-week cruise to Alaska as a surprise. First class everything. My mom had always dreamed of seeing glaciers. My dad pretended not to care, but he told my aunt on the phone he hadn't felt that relaxed in years. It made me feel useful, like maybe for once I wasn't just the quiet kid with the boring job. The first red flag should have been how quickly word spread. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started texting me random check-ins. Have you been? Messages, subtle inquiries about my job. I brushed it off. Maybe they were just being friendly. Maybe I wanted to believe that because the truth was, I was starved for their approval. I thought that if I kept giving, they'd finally see me. Then came the family reunion. It was the first one in over a decade, hosted at my Aunt Sharon's massive backyard. There were folding chairs, tents, even a rented bouncy castle for the kids. I showed up in a button-down and jeans, a couple of bottles of wine in hand. I'd driven 3 hours after a long work week, but I was genuinely excited. I figured it would be a chance to reconnect. My parents had come back from the cruise glowing. Mom, tanned and chatty. Dad, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. First, things were fine. I mingled, caught up with cousins, ate some really overcooked ribs. Then I overheard it. I had just stepped behind the tent near the drinks table, looking for a cooler with actual water instead of just soda and beer. That's when I heard my mom's voice, loud and clear, coming from the next cluster of chairs. "He's just our wallet with legs," she said, laughing. "Honestly, if he ever stops paying, I don't know what we'll do." Laughter followed. Not just hers, my aunt's, even my dad's. My heart didn't drop right away. It froze, like my brain needed a second to translate the words into meaning. Wallet with legs. I stayed behind the tent. I didn't move, just stood there while they went on chatting. My mom talked about the cruise, how great it was, how she might nudge Alex into booking another one next year. My aunt joked about how I was like a trust fund without the trust. My dad chimed in with some line about me always being too quiet to say no. I didn't confront them. I wish I could say I stormed out or made a scene, but I didn't. I just walked back to my car, told my cousin I had to head out early, and drove home in silence. I didn't even turn on the radio, just the hum of the tires and that phrase echoing in my head. Wallet with legs. When I got home, I stared at my phone for a long time. Part of me hoped I'd misheard. Maybe it was a joke, a bad one. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't new. That wasn't the first time they talked like that. Just the first time I'd heard it out loud. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the missed birthdays when I was a kid because my parents were working double shifts. About how I spent my 20s grinding through certifications so I could make sure they'd never have to work like that again. About how even as an adult I never felt enough. Not smart enough, not outgoing enough, not impressive enough. But useful? That I could be. They'd let me believe that was love. The next morning, I got up early and made some quiet moves. I froze the joint savings account I'd opened with them when they were having trouble budgeting. I canceled the automatic transfers for their utilities, the ones I'd set up, just until they got ahead. I'd even been paying their car insurance for over a year. That got canceled, too. Then I filed a password change across every shared account they'd ever had access to. My streaming services, Amazon, even my grocery delivery account they liked to use when Mom didn't feel like cooking. It wasn't rage. It wasn't petty. It was quiet, cold, calculated. And I went to bed that night with my phone on silent. When I woke up the next morning, I saw the screen glowing. 87 missed calls, 15 voicemails, 26 unread messages. The group chat was a war zone. My mom had messaged first. "Alex, there's a problem with the electric bill. Did you forget to send it?" Then, "Alex, I think something's wrong with the bank. Your dad's card isn't working." Then, "Are you ignoring us?" And finally, in all caps, "Alex, you need to fix this now. This isn't funny." I sat there in bed, phone still buzzing every few seconds, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like a bad son. I felt free. Then my brother called. Now, my brother never calls, ever. If he reaches out, it's because he needs something or wants to brag. But this time, his voice was tight. "Dude, what did you do?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at the ceiling. "They're freaking out," he continued. "Mom's crying. Dad's pacing. She said you're cutting them off." "Why?" I said nothing. And then he muttered something under his breath that made everything crystal clear. "She said you're punishing them over a joke. Man, you know how she is. Don't take it so personally." That was it. That was the moment everything inside me crystallized. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was years, decades of being used, overlooked, quietly depended on while being treated like I didn't matter beyond my paycheck. So I finally spoke. "Tell Mom," I said, my voice steady. "The wallet's closed." And I hung up. That was 2 days ago. Since then, the messages have shifted from anger to confusion to desperate bargaining. And just this morning, a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach twist. It was my father. His face was red. His jaw was clenched, and behind him, my mother, holding a stack of bills. And I knew right then the real reckoning hadn't even started yet. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there watching them through the peephole. The kind of eerie calm you get when you're way past anger. My mom knocked again. Sharper this time, her knuckles bouncing off the wood like she was entitled to an answer. My dad didn't move. He just stood there, arms folded, staring at the ground like he was rehearsing what to say. I opened it. Not wide, just enough to see them clearly. My mom didn't waste a second. "Alex, this isn't funny anymore. We need to talk." Her tone was clipped, commanding. Not a trace of guilt, just urgency. Like I was the one who had messed up, like I'd forgotten to take out the trash or missed a dentist appointment. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked flatly. She blinked at me, then held up the papers. Electric bills, internet invoices, a notice from the bank. "You froze the accounts, canceled everything. Why?" My dad finally spoke. "Son, if you had a problem, you should have come to us." I stared at them. Really stared at them. For the first time, I wasn't filtering anything to spare their feelings. "You said I was just a wallet with legs," I said. My mom's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. "It was a joke," she said quickly. "We were just playing around. You're taking it way too seriously." I nodded slowly. "Right. So, just to be clear, me covering your mortgage, your groceries, your vacations, your insurance, that was real. But your gratitude, that was the joke." Dad frowned. "It's not like that." "No," I said, stepping out a little. "Then tell me what it is like." They exchanged a look, and for a split second I thought they might apologize. Really apologize. But my mom's lips curled into something half repentant, half defensive. "You know how we are," she said. "We tease, but you're our son. We love you." I tilted my head. "Would you say that to a stranger who paid off your debt? That you love them while laughing behind their back?" Her face tightened. "That's not fair." "Oh," I said, smiling without humor. "But calling me a wallet with legs is?" She dropped the bills to her side with a sigh. "Look, we messed up. You made your point. So, can we stop this and just go back to normal?" Normal. That word hit me like a punch to the ribs. I thought about every holiday where I was expected to foot the bill. Every time they'd tell me, "You're the successful one," while never once asking how I was actually doing. Every text I got that started with, "Hey, quick favor," and ended with me wiring money. I took a deep breath. "There is no normal anymore," I said. "Not for me. Not if normal means being used and laughed at. You didn't just cross a line. You built your whole retirement plan on me and then mocked me for it." My dad bristled. "That's not true." "Really?" I said, eyes narrowing. "What's your plan now, Dad? You've been retired for 3 years. If I stop paying your utilities, what happens? If I stop filling the fridge, if I don't book your doctor's appointments, if I'm not the wallet anymore, what exactly is your plan?" Silence. My mom started to speak, but I cut her off. "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this because you needed to feel it. The way I felt for years. Invisible. Expected. Used. You say you love me, but you only ever called when you needed something." Now it was my mom's turn to bristle. "That's not fair. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. This is just you paying it forward." There it was. That old familiar line. The family's favorite debt trap. I nodded, lips pressed tight. "You know what?" I said. "I've more than paid it forward. I paid it with interest, late fees, and compound guilt. And now I'm closing the account permanently." Her jaw dropped. My dad looked like he'd just been slapped. "We're your parents," she said. "And I was your son," I replied. "Not your investment." I turned and walked back inside. Didn't slam the door. Didn't shout. Just closed it quietly. Finally, they stood there for a while. I watched from the window. My mom shook her head like she still didn't get it. My dad said something I couldn't hear, and they both walked off. Their bills clutched in her hands like prompts in a bad play. The next few days were chaos. I got texts from cousins guilt-tripping me for making mom cry. My aunt messaged me a long rant about family obligations. Someone even tagged me in a Facebook post that said, "Money changes people." They were right. It did change me, not because I got rich, but because I realized I was more than a credit card in human form. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love with money. But love that needs a receipt isn't real. Then silence for 4 days. And on the 5th, an envelope showed up under my door. No return address, just my name scrolled in my mom's tight, loopy cursive. Inside was a letter. 5 pages, handwritten, no jokes, no sarcasm, just raw, shaky words. It started with, "I didn't know you were hurting. I thought you were just quiet. I'm sorry we made you feel like a bank instead of a son." But the part that really made me sit down was the last line. "If you never speak to us again, I'll understand. But if you do, I want to meet the version of you I never took the time to know." I sat there for a long time, letter in hand, thinking, wondering, was it real? Was it too late? And then my phone buzzed. A new message. This time, not from my mom, not from my dad, but from my cousin Sarah. "Hey, heard what happened. Just wanted to say you did the right thing. I've been through it too. If you ever want to talk." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I didn't reply to Sarah right away, but her message sat differently in my chest than the others had. It didn't come with a price tag. No guilt, no demands, no, but there's still your parents' speech. Just acknowledgement, understanding, and that simple offer, "If you ever want to talk." I bookmarked it in my mind like a note left on the nightstand. Not urgent, but there if I needed it. That night, I reread the letter twice. I noticed the smudges near the bottom of page 3. Teardrops, maybe, or just a shaky hand dragging ink. And I realized something odd. My mom had written the word sorry 6 times, each one with different phrasing. Some awkward, some oddly formal, but they were there. That was new. Still, I didn't call. I didn't write back because sorry is easy when someone's pulled the plug on your comfort. I went about my week, focused on work, took longer walks, got my own groceries for once without buying for a household I didn't live in. On Friday, I bought myself a chair, just a stupid chair. Big, ridiculous, cushiony. I'd wanted one for years, but always put it off because there was always a more important expense. Usually theirs. When it arrived, I sat in it for 2 hours straight. Just sat. No emails. No calls. Just me and a book, and the quiet hum of a life that for once wasn't running at someone else's pace. Then late Saturday afternoon, I got a knock at my door. Not pounding, not frantic, just a knock. I checked the peephole out of habit, heart thudding in that old familiar way. It wasn't my parents. It was my cousin Sarah. She was holding 2 iced coffees and a manila folder. I opened the door, stunned. "Figured you'd need caffeine," she said, offering a drink with a wry smile. "Also figured you wouldn't open the door if I texted first." I stepped aside and let her in. Sarah had always been the quiet one at family parties, older than me by a few years, divorced young, moved out of state. We never talked much growing up, but there was always a calm about her, like she'd seen too much to get worked up about the usual chaos. We sat at my kitchen table. I didn't ask about the folder. Not right away. Instead, we talked about small things, work, life, why she moved back home. The iced coffee was stronger than I expected, and halfway through it, I finally asked, "So, what's in the folder?" She tapped her nails on it for a second, then slid it toward me. "Receipts," she said simply. I raised an eyebrow. "Financial ones," she added. "From my time as the family's favorite bank." I opened it. Inside were printed statements, bank transfers, annotated notes, payments made on behalf of my aunt, rent she'd covered for our grandmother, an invoice from years ago for a down payment she'd made on behalf of her younger sister, who'd conveniently forgotten to ever pay her back. "I got out a few years ago," she said. "Cut them off cold. Didn't speak to most of them for a long time. They still call me bitter. But you know what?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "It was the best decision I ever made." I flipped through the pages, stunned at the similarity. The same pattern. Family in need, generous gesture, escalating expectation, followed by guilt when the well ran dry. "They made you feel like the bad guy when you stopped," I said quietly. She smirked. "Of course, because we ruined the plan." I closed the folder and leaned back. "I thought it was just me. I admitted. They always make it feel that way, she said. That's the trick. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to say no. And when you finally do, you're ungrateful, difficult, broken. I nodded slowly. Sarah didn't stay long. She left the folder with me, said it might help to see it on paper to realize this wasn't a one-time slip. It was a pattern, generational, polished, and so good at wearing the mask of love. As I walked her to the door, she turned to me and asked something I didn't expect. Do you ever wonder what your life would look like? She said. If they just loved you without keeping score? I didn't answer because, yeah, I'd wondered. I was still wondering. After she left, I went back to my new chair, folder in hand. I spent the next hour rereading every page Sarah gave me, then laid it all out on the table like evidence in a trial. And I realized something. This wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about control. About being the one that could be leaned on, not out of mutual love, but out of convenience. As long as I stayed quiet and useful, I had a place in the family. The second I asked to be seen as more than that, I became difficult, ungrateful, overly sensitive. So when another message from my mom came in, just one line, this time I didn't open it immediately. Can we just talk, please? I sat with that for a while. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time in years, I was deciding whether I even wanted to. And just when I thought I might reply, the doorbell rang again. Not a knock this time. The bell. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body tense. I crossed the living room, heart tapping that uneven rhythm again. This time I didn't check the peephole. I just opened the door. And there, standing on my porch, was someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. My older sister, the one who'd moved away, the one who'd cut contact with everyone, including me. She was crying. Not the hysterical kind, not loud sobs, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep and exhausted. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. Her arms crossed like she didn't know whether to hug me or bolt back to the car. I hadn't seen her since her wedding 12 years ago. After she left town, we exchanged a few texts here and there, but she faded out of the family orbit like a satellite cut loose. The stories the family told afterward were vague. She thinks she's too good for us now. Or, she just can't handle responsibility. Nobody ever really talked about her. And after a while, I stopped asking. Now she was on my porch. Hey, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Hey. Neither of us moved for a moment, just standing there while the late afternoon sun slid lower behind her. Finally, I stepped aside and opened the door wider. You want to come in? She hesitated, then nodded. She took a seat at the kitchen table where Sarah had sat just hours earlier, and I poured us each a glass of water. Her eyes flicked over the manila folder, still lying open. I heard, she said, taking a sip. Well, I didn't hear. I saw the fallout. Mom posted some cryptic status about betrayal and family who think money makes them better. Dad's been calling everyone, even tried me. I raised an eyebrow. He called you? She gave a dry chuckle. Yeah. First time in 7 years. I didn't press her. I just waited. And after a few more moments, she leaned forward, elbows on the table. I came because I wanted to say I'm sorry. I blinked. For disappearing, she clarified. I left because I knew what they were. I just didn't have the words for it back then. I was in debt, exhausted, and they made me feel like I was failing at being their daughter. Every call was a guilt trip. Every favor came with a reminder of everything they'd ever done for me. I moved across the country just to breathe. I nodded slowly. And you didn't come back. I was scared, she admitted. Not of them, but of how easy it would have been to fall back into it. They make you feel like you owe them for existing. Yeah, I murmured. They do. She glanced at the folder. Sarah told me what happened. The cruise, the mortgage, the wallet with legs thing. I'm not surprised, but I am sorry they made you feel like that. I should have warned you. I should have. Stop, I said gently. You don't owe me anything. She went quiet for a moment, then gave me a long, searching look. Do you hate them? I let that question hang in the air. No, I finally said. But I don't trust them. and I don't think I want them in my life the way they are now. She nodded, looking relieved that I didn't try to justify it. Me neither. We talked for 2 hours about childhood, about how we'd both been pushed into silence by different forms of guilt, about the way our parents weaponized every gift they ever gave us, about how love always came with a receipt. It was like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. And then, as she stood to leave, she pulled a crumpled envelope from her coat pocket. I almost didn't bring this, she said, but Mom made me promise to deliver it. I took it but didn't open it. She said she'd changed, my sister added, that she wanted to talk, that she understood now. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if she ever can change, but I think she's scared. I nodded. Scared isn't the same as sorry. Exactly, she said. Then she hugged me, the first real hug I'd had in months. After she left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, envelope in hand. Eventually, I opened it. It was short, neat handwriting, carefully written like someone had practiced the words a few times. Alex, I said something awful, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance. A chance to learn what I missed, to rebuild something from the wreckage I caused. I've spent so long believing that providing for you made me a good parent. But I see now you've been the one providing for us all along. I want to be your mother again, not your dependent. Please let me try. Mom. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just set the letter down, then picked up my phone and typed a message. Short, clear. I got your letter. I'm not ready to talk, but I heard you. If you want to rebuild, it has to start with you fixing things on your own first. No money, no shortcuts, just effort. Real effort. I hit send. No immediate reply, no typing bubbles, no fireworks, but I felt lighter. A week passed then, too. During that time, I didn't hear from my parents, but I did hear from Sarah again. She invited me to a small dinner. Just a few cousins who'd cut ties with the family circus. People I hadn't realized were also quietly surviving their own version of this dysfunction. Felt good, real. One night, while walking home from that dinner, I got a message from my dad. Just one line. Working again part-time. Don't worry, we'll be okay. It wasn't much, but it was something. And then a few days later, my mom replied to my message. Thank you for reading it. I'll start with me. No asks, no complaints, just that. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a wallet. I felt like a person. Took months, but my boundaries held. I checked in occasionally, but I never stepped back into the role of fixer. They learned to manage things again, to survive without me fronting the bill. And slowly, awkwardly, we started talking. Really talking. Not out of obligation, but choice. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were slip-ups, relapses into guilt language, tiny barbs masked as jokes. But this time I called it out. And to their credit, they backed off. They listened because the only version of me they get to know now is the one who knows his worth. No longer a wallet with legs. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I, 33M. My name is Owen. If you asked my father who the future of our family was, he'd answer before you could finish the question, Dylan, obviously. He's my younger brother by 2 years, and he's been Dad's golden boy since we were kids. Started small. Dylan got a new bike while I got a second-hand one to build character. He got piano lessons, I got chores. He got praise for C's. I got lectures for minuses. I used to think I was imagining the favoritism. Maybe I was just sensitive, you know? But eventually, the pattern was too glaring to ignore, especially when the family business got involved. My dad owns a small chain of hardware stores. Not flashy, not tech-savvy. Just sturdy, dependable places that have kept our family afloat for decades. Growing up, I always assumed that one day I'd be part of that. I worked in those stores from the time I was 15. I learned the inventory system, managed deliveries, handled customers, even negotiated supplier contracts when I was barely out of college. I put in the time because I believed I was being trained to one day inherit part of it, maybe even take it over. That illusion shattered at 28, the day Dad called a family business meeting. I remember the way he said it, too. I've got big plans, boys. We sat at the old kitchen table, me, Dylan, and Dad, while Mom floated around pouring coffee like everything was normal. Dad looked straight at Dylan and said, "You'll be the face of our future, son." He turned to me briefly, gave me that generic half-smile and added, "Owen, you'll still have a role, of course. You're great with your hands." My role, it turned out, was running a remote supply shed they'd been using for storage. It was on the edge of town, behind the old lumber yard, barely functioning. Broken heating, flickering lights, a cracked window that never got fixed. Meanwhile, Dylan got the downtown storefront, newly renovated. Polished floors, glass walls, a fresh logo, and a team of employees I had helped interview but was now expected to support from afar. I wish I could say I fought back, that I stood up and made some impassioned speech, but I didn't. I swallowed the insult like I always had. I nodded, muttered something about whatever helps the business, and got in my truck. Then I drove to that damn shed and sat on an overturned bucket for 20 minutes, just staring at the moldy walls. That first year was awful. Dylan wasn't just incompetent. He was arrogant. He had no idea how inventory worked. He mismanaged orders, botched delivery schedules, and overspent on marketing gimmicks that didn't bring in a single new customer. And every time something went wrong, Dad called me. "Owen, can you check on Dylan's numbers? Owen, can you run an emergency delivery? Owen, do you know why Dylan's store is reporting losses?" I did everything they asked. Every late-night run, every financial patch-up, every system fix. I didn't even complain when they forwarded Dylan's bills to the main account I was managing. Meanwhile, my shed, my actual workspace, was falling apart. I worked out of a folding chair, had to plug in space heaters in the winter, and fought off a rat infestation with homemade traps. I was furious, but I still showed up because deep down I wanted them to see me. I thought maybe if I just kept proving my worth, someone would finally notice, but they never did. 2 years in, Dylan pivoted. He said the hardware business was too blue-collar and decided he wanted to launch a lifestyle brand, Rustic Urban. He convinced Dad to fund a line of home decor products, reclaimed wood shelves, iron pipe fixtures, mason jar chandeliers. He rented out a warehouse and hired some of his college buddies as designers. Dad pulled thousands from the main business account to cover the costs. I wasn't even told. I found out when I logged into the company budget and saw a line item labeled Innovation Investment. When I asked Dad about it, he said, "It's Dylan's project. You wouldn't get it, but this is how businesses grow, through bold ideas." I almost laughed. Bold ideas? The man who needed help operating a label printer was launching a product line. But again, I said nothing. I got back in my truck and drove to my rust-covered shed. And that's where it finally happened. That night, I stared at the water stains on the ceiling and just broke. Not loudly, quietly. The kind of breaking that feels like a long sigh. I sat there and realized for the first time that I didn't want their recognition anymore. I didn't want the family business. I didn't want to keep proving anything to people who had already decided who I was. I wanted to build something of my own. So I did. I started with small repairs, furniture restoration. I used salvage wood from the back lot and made a few rustic coffee tables. I listed them online under a generic name, Shed and Sons. No mention of the family, no photos of me. Within weeks, orders trickled in. People liked the authentic, raw look. I reinvested every dollar into better tools. Then I upgraded the shed with my own money, new lighting, insulation, ventilation. I hired one part-time helper, then another. By year 2, we had to move out of the shed and into an actual workshop. By year 3, we had a wait list. And while all this was happening, Dylan's Rustic Urban burned through cash like it was kindling. His friends bailed when the profits didn't come fast enough. Suppliers got tired of late payments. Customers complained about warped shelves and poor finishes. Dad kept covering for him until he couldn't. The flagship store downtown closed. The warehouse lease expired, and the family business? It started folding in on itself because everything they built was tied to Dylan's idea of success. I didn't gloat, not openly, but I also didn't bail them out. One afternoon, I got a call from Dylan. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year at that point. He sounded unusually humble, tired, even. "Hey man," he started. I've been following what you've been doing. Shed and Sons, right? You built something really cool. I didn't say anything. I was thinking, he continued, maybe there's a way we can partner, combine our ideas, bring the family name back strong, you know? I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I let that silence hang in the air for a solid 10 seconds. Not out of spite, just to feel it. For once, I wanted Dylan to sit in the quiet that I'd lived in for years. The kind that grows in the spaces between being overlooked and being underestimated. Eventually, I said, come by the shop tomorrow. We'll talk. The next afternoon, he showed up in a car I recognized. It used to be Dad's, a fancy black sedan that Dylan had borrowed permanently once things went south. He walked in looking a bit thinner, wearing a flannel shirt that still had a tag on it and scuffed boots that were clearly more style than function. He tried to hide how much the shop impressed him. I could see his eyes darting around, taking in the custom equipment, the polished wood finishes, the neatly stacked orders waiting for pickup. But the thing that caught him off guard most was my team. 4 guys all younger than me, all focused and clearly proud to work here. He stepped up to the front desk and gave me that classic Dylan smirk, the one he used when he wanted something. This place looks legit, he said. Thanks, I replied, leaning against the counter. Took a while. A lot of nights alone in that shed. He chuckled like that memory was just a funny anecdote now. Yeah, about that. Listen, I know things got kind of weird between us, but I think we could really build something together. I've got ideas. Marketing, branding, maybe even a showroom. Rustic urban might have flopped, but the concept still has legs. You've got the product. I've got the vision. I listened. Let him talk. He even pulled out a notebook with sketches, logos, packaging mock-ups, slogans like, where craft meets cool. It was almost cute in a delusional kind of way. And then, when he'd finished, I reached into a drawer behind the counter and slid an envelope across to him. He blinked. What's this? Application, I said. For a junior floor technician. Starting wages on the second page. The room went dead quiet. He looked up, confused. You're joking, right? Nope. You said we'd talk about a partnership. I did. And this is it. You want to be part of what I built? This is the door. But it doesn't open to a corner office. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I could almost see the moment his pride cracked. He didn't yell, didn't throw the envelope. He just stared at it like it had personally insulted him. I watched him wrestle with the realization that he wasn't being offered a lifeline. He was being offered a lesson. Finally, he pushed the envelope back. I'm not scrubbing floors. Then we're done here. He stood there for another second, probably expecting me to fold, to offer him something more dignified. But I didn't. I just turned and walked back toward the workroom, and he walked out. That night, Dad called. I heard Dylan stopped by, he said, voice cautious. Said you humiliated him. I offered him a job. He turned it down. He's your brother, Owen. You two need to stick together. You mean like when he stuck me in a moldy shed while he burned through your money? There was a long pause. Then Dad said, he was trying to innovate. I laughed, sharp and humorless. He was trying to look important. That's not innovation. You always take things personally. No, Dad. I take things seriously. You just never noticed because you were too busy waiting for Dylan to become something he never was. He didn't respond. I could hear his breathing on the other end, slow and heavy, like he was trying to find the right words to bring me back in line. But I was done being manageable. I'm not bailing you out, I said before he could start another lecture. You made your choices. Now you can live with them. I hung up before he could answer. After that, things got quiet for a while. Then came the knock on my shop door 2 weeks later. It was late, almost closing time, and I assumed it was just a delivery mix-up or maybe one of my guys forgot something, but it wasn't. It was my mother. Now, my mom's always been the peacemaker in our family. The one who smooths things over, avoids conflict, and talks in soft tones even when she's upset. She hadn't said much during the past few years. She'd always stayed just out of the spotlight while the favoritism played out, always telling me, your father means well, or it's just how Dylan is. But that night, she looked tired. Not just physically. Soul-tired. She stepped inside without a word and held something out to me. It was a manila folder. I took it, opened it, and inside was a balance sheet from the main hardware business. Losses, debt, past due notices, supplier terminations. "They're selling," she said, her voice quiet. "The business. What's left of it. Your father won't admit it, but he's lost everything." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. "I tried to tell him," she continued. "Tried to make him see what you were building. He wouldn't listen. Still won't." She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw guilt in her eyes. Real guilt. "He thinks you'll forgive him, that maybe somehow you'll buy the business and bring it back." I stared at her, stunned. "He wants me to pay to clean up his mess?" She didn't nod, didn't shake her head, just looked down at the floor. Then she added something I wasn't expecting. "He put the house up as collateral. Our house." And just like that, the air left the room. Because this wasn't just about pride or favoritism anymore. This was about consequences. Real, devastating consequences. I had a decision to make. Let them lose everything or get involved. But not the way they wanted. Not this time. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I sat down, folder still in hand, trying to process it all. My workshop, usually filled with the hum of tools and laughter from the crew, felt oppressively silent in that moment. I stared at the numbers on the page, bleeding red from every corner, a spreadsheet of desperation disguised as data, and thought about that moment in the kitchen all those years ago. "You're great with your hands." I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I'd already bled that emotion dry. What I felt now was something colder, something sharper. A sense of clarity that only comes when you've been ignored long enough to become dangerous. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. She looked up. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Because I think you're the only one left who can fix it." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "No, Mom. I already did fix it. My life, my business. I built all of this because of them, not for them, and certainly not to patch up Dylan's mess." Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "It's not just about Dylan or your father. It's about what's left, about your family's name, about your grandfather's legacy. He started the business with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox." I looked her in the eye, and this time I didn't flinch. "Grandpa gave Dad a business. Dad gave Dylan a vanity project. And you want me to revive a corpse?" She didn't argue. She just looked tired. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," she said softly. "But maybe, just maybe, there's still something worth saving." That stuck with me long after she left. Long after I shut down the shop and locked up for the night. Her words circled in my head like a mosquito. Couldn't sleep. I sat in my truck for what must have been an hour, staring at that folder again. She was right about one thing. My grandfather had built that company from scratch. And I remembered him vividly. A giant of a man with hands like sandpaper and a voice like gravel. He used to bring me to the stores when I was little. Let me help him organize screws by size and color while he'd sip coffee from a chip thermos. "Hard work, Owen," he'd always say. "That's the only thing in this life that never lies to you." And now his name, our name, was about to be sold off for parts. I didn't sleep that night. I pulled an all-nighter, pacing, scribbling notes, running numbers, digging up every memory and emotion tied to that business. I thought about what I'd be saving and who I'd be saving it for. By dawn, I had my answer, but before I could make any decisions, I needed to see it with my own eyes. So later that morning, I drove out to one of the stores. Not Dylan's old flagship downtown, the original one. The first shop my grandfather opened. It hadn't been touched in months. The windows were fogged with grime. The closed until further notice sign hung crooked on the door, and the mailbox overflowed with unopened bills. I pushed the door open. The bell above it gave a weak jingle like it was coughing up its final breath. The inside smelled of dust and old wood. Shelves stood half-stocked, some sagging under the weight of forgotten inventory. A layer of sadness coated everything. And yet, it felt familiar. It felt like something that could be something again if someone gave a damn. I spent 2 hours there, walking the aisles, running my hand along the worn counters, remembering where the register used to be before Dylan replaced it with a self-checkout system that never worked right. I even found one of the old shop aprons behind the counter, still folded neatly like someone planned to come back. And in that moment, something shifted. I wasn't doing this for Dylan or for Dad or even for the family name. I was doing it for the man who taught me the value of a good day's work, for the teenage version of me who believed in legacy before it was weaponized against him, for the people in this town who still remembered what this place used to mean. And maybe, just maybe, to prove that the real future of this family had been sitting in a rundown shed all along, quietly becoming a force they'd never seen coming. The next day, I made 3 calls, one to my lawyer, one to my accountant, and the third to the bank. But the 4th call, that one I made in person. I walked right up to my father's house, rang the doorbell, and waited. When he opened the door, wearing the same robe he always wore like a badge of old authority, he blinked in surprise. "You're up early," he said, tone wary. "I'm buying the business," I said flatly. He blinked again. "Really? But not from you. I already made the offer to the bank. It's clean. It's legal. And it's being finalized this week. I'm not saving you. I'm salvaging what you threw away." He looked stunned. Wait, you went around me?" I leaned in, voice low and razor sharp. "You gave me a shed, Dad, remember? Said I was good with my hands. Well, turns out these hands build empires. And now I'm buying the rubble of yours. Not as a son, not as a partner, but as your replacement." His mouth opened, then closed. I could see the wheels turning, the bruised ego scrambling for footing. "You're making a mistake, Owen." "No," I said, turning to leave. "You did years ago. I'm just the one fixing it." And as I walked back to my truck, I didn't look back. But I knew deep in my gut that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I officially signed the papers on a Friday morning. The moment the ink dried, the business was mine. Not a part of it, not a controlling stake. All of it. The stores, the brand, the debt, the memories, good and bad. It came with baggage. Sure. A crumbling reputation, empty shelves, burned supplier bridges. But it also came with something more important. A foundation, cracked and neglected maybe, but one I could rebuild with my own hands. That same day, I called a meeting with what remained of the staff across the locations. Only 12 people showed up. The rest had quit or been laid off over the past few years, casualties of Dylan's vision. Some of the people in that room looked weary. A few looked bitter, but most just looked tired. Tired of waiting for someone to lead with a brain instead of a brand logo. I stood at the front, hands in my pockets, and told them the truth. "I'm not here to pretend the last few years didn't happen," I said. "And I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here because I still believe in what this place can be. We're not going to turn it around overnight. But if you're with me, we're going to build something real again. Not trendy, not flashy, just solid like it used to be." A slow silence followed, then a nod, then another, and by the end of the hour, every single person had agreed to stay. We started small, repaired the original shop first, repainted the walls, rewired the lights, scrubbed the windows until you could see clear through to the back wall. I rehired our old inventory manager, Rosa, who hadn't worked there since Dylan fired her for being too negative. She cried when I called her, showed up the next morning with a thermos and a clipboard, ready to rebuild the database from scratch. The first real test came when we reached out to our old suppliers. I personally drove 3 hours to meet with the biggest one, Henderson Tools, because they'd been burned the worst by Dylan's unpaid invoices. I walked into their warehouse office with a check and an apology. The manager, a gruff guy named Larry, looked at me like I was holding a dead rat. "You think this makes up for 3 years of BS?" he said. "No," I replied. "I think it earns me 5 minutes." We talked for 20. By the end of it, I had a probationary agreement and a handshake. The next few months were a blur. We ran barebones promotions, hosted repair workshops, started a Tools for Teens program that donated used tools to local schools with shop classes. I posted regular updates online. Not some curated influencer-style marketing, but real photos of us fixing the place up. staff laughing over broken shelves, before and afters that actually meant something. And people responded. Customers trickled in. Then they walked out with bags in hand. Then they came back and brought friends. By month 6, we were turning a small profit. By month 9, we were able to restock all 4 locations. And by the 1-year mark, we weren't just surviving, we were growing. The old business that had once been left for dead was not only breathing again, it was running. As for Dylan, he did take that job application home, apparently. According to Mom, he left it on his nightstand for weeks. He never filled it out. I wasn't surprised, but he did show up again, this time unannounced. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when he walked into the original store, the one Grandpa had built. He looked thinner than before, more worn down. The swagger was gone. He wandered around for a bit, browsing like a customer. No one recognized him. He eventually made his way to the counter where I was checking out a couple buying paint. He waited quietly until I was done. Then he stepped forward. "This place looks alive." I didn't say anything. He glanced around. "I heard you're doing pretty well." I nodded. "We are. I didn't think you'd actually pull it off. That's why you were never part of it." He winced just slightly, but didn't argue. He took a deep breath. "I came to say something." "Go ahead." I messed up. I let the family name go to my head. Thought I could shortcut my way to success. "You didn't just mess up, Dylan. You got other people fired. You nearly put Mom and Dad on the street. You burned everything down and walked away while I picked up the ashes." He looked down, ashamed. "I know." We stood there for a while. The rain outside pattered softly on the windows. A customer walked past us, dragging a bag of mulch behind them. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Dylan said finally. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. You deserved better. You were the future of this family. I just wasn't man enough to admit it." That caught me off guard, but I believed him. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not completely. But I saw in his face the thing I had waited years to see. Humility. Genuine, unpolished, hard-earned humility. "I hope you find your own way," I said. Finally, he nodded. "I'm trying. I got a job working warehouse logistics over in Westfield. Pays crap, but it's a start." "Good," I said. "Start's what matters." He lingered for a second, then offered a hand. I took it, and that was it. No grand reconciliation, no dramatic hug, just a quiet understanding between 2 brothers who had finally stopped pretending. A few weeks later, my parents showed up. They walked in together, hand in hand, like they were stepping into a time machine. Dad looked older, slower. His once firm handshake now trembled slightly when he reached across the counter. "I came to see what you've done," he said. I didn't answer. I just gestured toward the shop floor. Fresh stock, smiling staff, a young couple debating between 2 types of wood stain. The sound of drills and hammers echoed faintly from the back room. He watched it all in silence. "I was wrong about you," he said. Finally, I raised an eyebrow. "About which part?" He gave a tired smile. "All of it." There was no apology beyond that. But I didn't need one, because this was the apology, the admission, the effort, the fact that they came here instead of calling or sending word through Mom. That was enough. We didn't become close again. We didn't start having Sunday dinners or reminiscing over old photo albums. But over time, things settled. The wounds stopped bleeding. The calls became less awkward, the silence less sharp. And as for me, I kept building. A year after I bought the business, I rebranded, not to erase the past, but to honor the future. I called it Red Pine Tools, after the tree that once stood outside Grandpa's first shop. We planted a new red pine in front of the flagship location. Customers donated time and money. Someone carved Grandpa's initials into the trunk. On the anniversary of the relaunch, I stood beside the tree watching families browse the aisles, kids running between the paint section and the PVC pipes, a man asking Rosa if we carried live edge wood, my crew loading up a flatbed with freshly milled oak. And I realized something. The future of the family was never supposed to be flashy. It was supposed to be honest. That's what I built. That's what I'll leave behind. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Caleb. I'm 23 now, but this all happened just over a year ago on the day I graduated from college. I was the first in my family to finish a 4-year university program. You'd think that would be a big deal. You'd think a family might be proud, but let's just say in my house, things like pride came with conditions and I didn't meet them. I come from a very loud, very image-conscious family. My parents, especially my mom, care more about what things look like than what they actually are. My younger sister, Mia, has always been the golden child. She could sneeze into a microphone and they'd call it a TED Talk. She graduated high school 2 years before I did, and the celebration they threw for her still gets talked about in family group chats like it was a royal coronation. They rented a tent big enough for a wedding, set off backyard fireworks, even though our HOA sent them a warning, and had this massive catered buffet with little gold cards labeling everything like mini Capri skewers and imported prosciutto with fig jam. Mia even made a dramatic entrance in a white dress like she was accepting an Oscar. I'm not exaggerating. That's just how it was. And me, I'd always been the quiet one, the fixer, the one who noticed when the oil light came on in my mom's car, the one who cleaned up after parties I wasn't even invited to. I worked full-time while studying, took night classes, skipped out on trips and birthdays just to finish my final thesis. My graduation wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the first thing I'd ever done entirely for myself, which made what happened sting that much more. I'd given them 2 months' notice about the date. I sent a formal e-invite and even followed up with texts. My dad read it and responded with a thumbs-up emoji. My mom hearted the message. Mia never replied. Not that I expected her to. She was too busy posting filtered selfies from whatever beach her new boyfriend had dragged her to that week. Still, I held on to hope. Maybe they were planning something quiet, something thoughtful, something that said, "We see you, Caleb." The morning of my graduation, I woke up early and ironed my shirt twice. I took the time to style my hair properly, something I rarely bothered with. I stared at myself in the mirror, thinking, this is it. This is the day they finally get it. They didn't. When I got to the ceremony, I didn't see them. My name was called. I walked the stage, smiled into the crowd, and nothing. Not a single familiar face. I figured maybe they'd show up late. Maybe they were running behind. When I got home, I saw a sad little attempt at a party waiting for me in the backyard, if you could even call it that. A wrinkled congrats banner that looked like it had been rescued from a junk drawer. 1 large cold pizza in a greasy box. 2 2-liter bottles of off-brand soda. No music, no neighbors, no friends, just my mom on her phone, my dad watching TV through the patio door, and Mia half asleep in a lawn chair. I stood there, stunned. My mom looked up and said with this forced smile, "See, we did something. Be grateful we even did that much." She gestured to the pizza like it was a gourmet spread. I didn't say anything. My uncle, who must have stopped by on his way to actually do something fun, muttered, "Not everything has to be about you, Caleb." That's when something inside me cracked. Not with rage, but this hollow, sinking kind of disappointment. Like realizing the prize you've been chasing your whole life was just a cardboard cutout. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned around, went into the house, grabbed my diploma off the counter where they dumped it like junk mail, and walked upstairs to my room. I stared at that piece of paper for a long time. Not because I was proud, but because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to accept. They were never going to change. I opened my laptop and started looking at flights anywhere. Just not here. Somewhere far enough away that I wouldn't bump into any of them at a grocery store. Somewhere quiet, peaceful. I found a one-way ticket to a city I'd never been to and clicked book now without hesitation. That night, I packed a single bag. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't leave a note. I left before sunrise. I landed in Seattle just after noon the next day. It wasn't exactly the kind of place you'd go for sunshine and celebration, but it felt clean, fresh, like a blank page I could finally write on without anyone else's scribbles smudging the margins. I booked a cheap Airbnb for a week, just enough time to get my head on straight. My plan wasn't entirely figured out, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going back. That first night, as I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, I felt something unfamiliar. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but a peaceful one. No one calling me to fix a broken sink. No one asking for rides, money, or help. No passive-aggressive sighs. No guilt. Just me. It was terrifying and freeing. Back home, I'd always been the reliable one, the helper, the one they assumed would always be around because I never complained. And honestly, that's on me. I made it easy for them. I kept saying yes when I should have said no. I showed up when no one else did. And they took that as a given, like I was furniture, like I was part of the house, not someone who needed space or appreciation. But this time, I wasn't going to quietly fade into the background. Over the next few weeks, I got to work. First, I changed my number. Then, I locked down my email accounts, rerouted important mail, and pulled the plug on every shared service I was paying for. And there were a lot. See, while they were out throwing fireworks and calling each other family goals on social media, I'd been the one quietly footing the bills. My parents' phone plan under my name, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, all me. That family account? Guess who set that up? I'd co-signed on Mia's student loans, helped pay for my dad's car insurance after he got into that fender bender, and even floated my mom a few grand for dental work that mysteriously turned into a spa weekend in Palm Springs. They never said thank you, not once, and I never demanded it until now. I logged into every account and wiped them clean. Canceled payments, changed passwords, even the group family calendar I'd maintained, filled with birthdays, reminders, and appointments. I deleted it entirely. I didn't make a scene. I didn't send a dramatic goodbye. I just removed myself from every part of their lives that relied on me functioning in the background. It took 3 days for the messages to start. First came the confusion. Mia texted, "Hey, did the Wi-Fi go down at the house? I can't log into Netflix." Mom texted, "Did you change the phone plan? I can't make any calls." Dad texted, "Your uncle said the insurance company is trying to reach me. What's going on?" I ignored them all. Then came the panic. Mom texted, "Caleb, what is happening? Why are you doing this?" Mia texted, "You're being so dramatic right now. Just fix whatever you did. I have a date night." Dad texted, "This isn't funny, son. Grow up and take responsibility." That one hit me hard. I've been taking responsibility for everything for years, quietly, thanklessly. But now that I was taking responsibility for myself, it was suddenly a crime. What really made my blood go cold was what came next. A group message, a new one, since I left the old one. Mom texted, "We need to talk. What you're doing is hurting the family." Mia texted, "You're making things harder for everyone. Just come back and we'll pretend this didn't happen." Uncle Jim texted, "Real mature, Caleb. So, this is how you repay us for raising you." Repay them? As if I owed them for dragging me to my own graduation party like it was a chore. As if I was supposed to smile and thank them for a cold pizza and a sarcastic lecture on humility. As if their bare minimum effort was a gift I should be grateful for. I didn't respond, but I did something better. I posted a single photo. It was of my diploma next to a packed suitcase and a plane ticket stub. No caption, just silence. They lost it. Mom texted, "Where are you?" Mia texted, "Did you seriously leave?" Dad texted, "This is your family, Caleb. Don't throw it away over a misunderstanding." But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a culmination. The worst part? Not a single one of them actually apologized. Not for missing my ceremony. Not for the excuse of a party. Not for the years of treating me like a human wallet with no emotions. It's almost funny. When I was around, they never noticed me. But now that I was gone, they couldn't stop looking. And yet I wasn't done. Because there was one final thing left to pull. One last thread in the fabric they'd wrapped themselves in. Something they'd never see coming. But that would finally make them understand what it means to be taken for granted. A week passed. Then 2. I'd expected the messages to dry up, for the panic to wear off and the silence to settle. But it didn't. If anything, it escalated. Mia posted a cryptic story on Instagram. Just a photo of an empty dining table with the caption, "Family doesn't disappear unless they were never family to begin with." My mom started calling from blocked numbers. I never picked up. My dad emailed me through his work account, something he hadn't done since I was in high school. I know you're upset, but punishing the entire family like this isn't right. We can talk. Just come home. It was weird seeing the word home in a sentence like that, because in all the years I lived under that roof, it never really felt like home to me. It felt like a contract I was expected to renew again and again, quietly, without complaint. But I hadn't come this far just to ghost them and be done. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted clarity. I wanted a reckoning. I wanted them to see the damage, not just feel the inconvenience. So I set the final phase in motion. Back before I left, I had been listed as an authorized user on just about everything. Insurance policies, utility bills, loan applications. Because I had the best credit score in the family, they used me as the safety net, the cosigner, the invisible backbone. What they didn't realize was that I still had access, legal access, and receipts. I dug through old emails and pulled up documents. Car leases, tuition payments, a business loan Uncle Jim had taken out for the new landscaping company that mysteriously never opened. Guess whose name was listed as the backup guarantor? Mine. I gathered every one of those files, screenshots, payment records. I created a folder. Then I did what no one in my family had ever done. I told the truth. I wrote a letter, not some angry, all-caps rant. A calm, detailed, surgical breakdown of every favor, every dollar, every signed form they'd conveniently forgotten. I printed it out along with the documents and mailed it. Yes, physically mailed it to their house. Certified delivery. I didn't include a return address. I didn't even include a signature, just a post-it on top that read, "You asked why I left. Here's why." The reaction was nuclear. 2 days later, my cousin texted me, "Dude, what did you send them?" Another message followed. "Mia just called me sobbing. Your mom won't come out of her room." I didn't reply, but I wasn't done. You see, all those things I'd signed on to, I could legally remove myself now. The loans had either matured or had new cosigners. The car insurance, I notified the provider I no longer consented to being on the plan. The utility bills changed, disconnected, reallocated. One by one, I untangled myself. But I knew my mom wouldn't feel it until it touched something that bruised her pride. So I called the private school board where she'd been bragging about her children's accomplishments for years, Mia's alma mater. And I submitted a formal request to have my name removed from all alumni materials, yearbooks, and donation records. She used to boast that her son was featured in their alumni spotlight. Not anymore. The silence that followed was different this time. Not panicked, not angry, just gone. They stopped texting, stopped calling. No more social media jabs. No new guilt trips disguised as jokes. Just radio silence. And strangely, that's when it hit me. Not just the freedom, but the grief. Because for so long, I'd been begging for scraps of affection, twisting myself into something palatable just to be accepted. And now here I was, free, but also mourning something that never really existed. Still, I knew I'd made the right choice. I found a small apartment in the city. Nothing fancy, but mine. Got a job at a local nonprofit doing outreach programs. Something that made me feel connected. Real. For the first time in my life, I woke up not wondering who needed me, but what I wanted to do. Then, a few months later, something strange happened. A handwritten letter arrived. No return address, no name on the envelope, just my first name written in tight cursive. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't long. "We didn't realize how much we took from you. Maybe we still don't. But we feel the loss. If you ever want to talk, we'll be here, Mom." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it fixed anything, but because for once it didn't demand something from me. It didn't tell me how to feel. It was quiet. I folded the letter and tucked it in the back of my desk drawer. And I haven't responded. Not yet. Because this story wasn't about their apology. It was about my choice. Summer faded into fall, and with it, the old version of me shed like skin I hadn't realized I'd been wearing for years. I didn't rush to replace it. I let the quiet settle. I worked long days, cooked for myself, even joined a weekend chess group. Nothing impressive, just a few people who met at the library with thermoses of coffee and stories they weren't afraid to tell. And for the first time, I started telling mine. Not all of it. Not the part about the cold pizza or the diploma that felt more like a receipt than a celebration, but enough. Enough to let it out in pieces, like slowly opening a window in a dusty room. I never expected the healing to come in small things. Like the way the barista at the corner cafe remembered my name and asked how my week was going. Or the first time I came home after work and realized the apartment didn't feel temporary anymore. I even caught myself humming while making dinner one night. A dumb, nostalgic tune my mom used to hum when we baked cookies in December. I stopped mid-note and just stood there holding the wooden spoon like a relic. The moment hit me hard, not because I missed her, but because I didn't hate her. Not really. I just finally understood the difference between loving someone and letting them break you. But something started gnawing at me. Quietly. It crept in during the still hours when the city dimmed and I was left alone with my thoughts. I hadn't blocked them. I could have, but I didn't. The truth is, a part of me wanted them to see what life looked like without me. Not out of cruelty, out of hope. Hope that they'd reflect, that maybe someone in that house would say, "We should have done better by him." And one day I got that sort of. Came from Mia of all people. She sent me a DM. Not a selfie, not a voice note, just text. "I know I was awful to you. I really didn't see it until you were gone. Mom's been different, quieter. Dad doesn't say much anymore. The house feels empty. I guess it always was. We just didn't notice because you kept filling the gaps. I miss you. Not what you did, not the stuff. You." I stared at the message for a while, not knowing what to feel. Part of me rolled my eyes. Another part softened because even if it was late, even if it didn't fix anything, she named it. That meant something. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit just like I let the letter from my mom sit in that drawer. Because what no one tells you about walking away is this. The distance hurts even when it's healthy. Even when you're right, healing doesn't erase the ache. It just teaches you how to hold it without bleeding. Weeks passed. Then one night, I found myself standing on my apartment balcony, watching the lights of the city blink on one by one. I held my phone in my hand, not out of impulse, but consideration. I typed out a message. Not a long one, just this. "I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left to save myself. I'm still figuring things out. But thank you for finally seeing me." I didn't send it, but I didn't delete it either, because something was coming. A moment I hadn't planned for. A choice I'd have to make. Not about going back, but about what kind of person I wanted to be now. And it all started with an email I got the next morning. It was from the university. Subject: Invitation to speak at winter commencement. I stared at the subject line like it was a mistake. Invitation to speak at winter commencement. First, I thought it was a mass email. One of those blanket messages sent to every graduate to boost attendance. But when I clicked it open, I saw my name, Caleb Morris, right there in the greeting. They knew who I was. It was from Professor Dean, my old thesis advisor. He wrote that he'd been following my work since graduation. Apparently, the nonprofit I joined had been mentioned in an alumni newsletter, and he'd put two and two together. He said, "My journey from student to graduate to someone who chose to walk a different path was the kind of story students needed to hear." He ended the email with, "If you have the courage to share your truth, I know they'll listen." I read it 3 times, then a 4th. I don't know what part of it struck me the hardest, that someone had seen me after all this time, or that I was finally being asked to tell my version of the story. For a while, I sat there frozen, not out of fear, out of disbelief, because somewhere inside me, buried under years of silence and compromise, was a kid who had always wanted someone to say, "You matter. Your story matters." I said, "Yes." The weeks leading up to the speech were strange, a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wrote my draft late at night, usually after work, reading it aloud to the blank walls of my apartment like they were an audience. I didn't want it to be bitter. I didn't want to bash my family, but I wanted to be honest. I practiced it until I could say the hardest lines without my voice shaking. The day of the ceremony, I wore the same shirt I'd worn to my own graduation, the one I'd ironed twice, hoping someone in the crowd would be proud of me. This time, I didn't care if anyone in the audience knew my name. I was doing it for me. The auditorium was packed. Rows of fresh-faced graduates, their families clutching balloons and flowers, siblings squirming in uncomfortable pews. I stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and began. I spoke about my time at the university, the long nights, the double shifts, the quiet moments of doubt. I spoke about what it felt like to walk the stage and look into a crowd that wasn't there for me. And I spoke about what came after. The silence, the grief, and the decision to leave. Not because I hated my family, but because I loved myself enough to stop accepting scraps. And then I said this: sometimes the people who raised you will claim your victories while ignoring your wounds. They'll call it love while handing you silence. And when you finally stop showing up, they'll call you the problem. But leaving isn't weakness. Choosing peace over performance is not abandonment. It's survival. I left because I had to, and it was the hardest, most important thing I've ever done. The room was still. Then someone started clapping. A single pair of hands, then more. And then it rose, wave after wave, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. I walked off the stage, not feeling triumphant, but real. What I didn't expect was what came next. As I stepped into the hallway backstage, I saw a woman waiting near the exit. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was different, shorter, less styled. She wasn't wearing the usual heavy makeup or bright colors, just a gray coat and a quiet, nervous expression. My mom. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. We just stood there in the kind of silence that weighs more than words. Finally, she said, "You look taller up there." I gave a small, dry smile. "That's probably just the stage." She nodded. Then, more quietly, "You were right." I blinked. "About what?" She looked down at her hands. "About all of it. About how we treated you. About what we expected without giving anything back." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how much you were carrying. I didn't want to know. It was easier not to." I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "I watched your speech online. Mia sent me the link. I almost didn't come today. I thought maybe you'd hate me if I showed up, but I thought maybe you'd hate it more if I didn't." I nodded slowly. "You were right." We stood in silence again. This time it felt different. Not uncomfortable, just full. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For the pizza, for the banner, for all the years before that. I thought love meant showing up when it was convenient. But you showed me what it really looks like." I could feel a lump rising in my throat. I swallowed it back. "I'm not ready to come home," I said. She nodded. "I know. But I'm okay." A pause. "Then I can see that now." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It wasn't a Hallmark moment, but it was real, and that was enough. She left without asking me to follow. And I walked outside into the cold winter air, not feeling broken, but whole. That night, I went back to my apartment. I took out the letter she'd sent me months ago, the one I'd hidden in the drawer, and reread it. Then I took out my phone, found her number, and saved it back into my contacts. I didn't call her, not yet. But this time I didn't delete it either. Months passed. Mia reached out again. We started texting more often. Just little things. Music, books, photos of weird meals she tried to make. There was no grand apology from her. But there didn't need to be. The effort was there. That was new. One day, I mailed her a copy of my speech with a note scribbled at the bottom. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of the person you're trying to be." She sent back a voice memo. Just one word, "Thanks." And then, exactly 1 year after the day I walked out of that backyard with my diploma in hand, I booked another flight. One way, this time not to disappear but to visit. Not because I owed anyone, but because I chose to. And that made all the difference. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I 29 am Eric. And I guess you could say I've always been the background character in my own family. You know the type. Not the black sheep exactly. More like the invisible one. The guy who remembers every birthday, sends flowers on Mother's Day, helps with moving day, lends tools, and quietly picks up the tab when Dad forgets his wallet. I'm not flashy. I'm not the loud one. I'm the dependable one. And maybe that's why it took me so long to realize I was being used or worse, excluded. Started small. A missed invite here. A forgotten group chat there. Oh, you didn't get the text? I thought someone told you. But I let it slide. Because that's what you do when you love people, right? You assume the best. You give the benefit of a doubt. You don't let your insecurities speak for you. But sometimes silence is just the sound of someone trying not to cry in front of a dozen people wearing matching shirts you didn't even know existed. The baby shower was for my niece, Ellie. Well, technically she's my cousin's daughter, but we've always called each other aunt and uncle in this sprawling, tangled family tree. I showed up with a carefully wrapped gift, a hand-knitted blanket I commissioned from a woman at the farmer's market who did custom embroidery. Ellie's name was stitched in soft lavender script across the corner. I was proud of it. Felt like I'd finally nailed a thoughtful, personal gift. The venue was a rented garden patio behind a quaint little cafe. String lights, mason jar centerpieces, pastel streamers fluttering in the breeze. Everyone was already there when I arrived. I spotted my sister, Jin, by the drink table talking animatedly to her cousin, Rachel. I waved. Jin gave me the kind of wave you give a mailman. Brief, distant, almost performative. Still, I smiled, kept it polite. I signed the guest book, handed over the blanket, and made small talk with the few relatives who actually remembered my name without prompting. It wasn't until halfway through the afternoon, as I helped one of the older uncles balance a paper plate of mini quiches, that I brought up the picnic. Looking forward to the family picnic next weekend, I said casually. I took the day off work. My Uncle Dave, who's always been the gruff but lovable type, let out a low chuckle. Oh, that was yesterday. I blinked. What? He tilted his head at me, as if trying to gauge whether I was joking or just clueless. Didn't anyone tell you? I just stood there. My mouth opened, then closed. I scanned the nearby faces. Some avoided eye contact. Others, like my cousin Maddie, just looked at me with pity. And then came the final gut punch. My cousin Nate, who I used to babysit when he was 6, pulled out his phone and turned it around to show me a group photo. There they all were, matching navy blue shirts with Family Picnic 2025, in white cursive across the chest, grinning faces, folding chairs, a massive picnic cake shaped like a watermelon slice. Everyone. Mom, Dad, Jin, even Great Aunt Louisa, who hasn't left her house in 2 years. I swallowed hard. Oh, I managed to say, forcing a chuckle that sounded as brittle as dried leaves. Then Jin walked by. She glanced at the photo and said, with that smug little half-smile I've come to loathe, it was kind of a close family thing. I turned to her, stunned. I am close family. She raised an eyebrow. Sure, but you know what I mean. No, Jin, I really didn't. I excused myself a few minutes later, pretended I had to take a call, then just walked to my car. The whole drive home, my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly I could see the whites of my knuckles. My head buzzed with questions I'd asked myself a dozen times before, but never dared say aloud. Was I just boring? Had I done something to offend someone? Did they even notice I wasn't there? But somewhere between the freeway exit and my apartment parking lot, something in me clicked. Not snapped. This wasn't rage. It was quieter than that. Cooler, like a fog finally lifting. I realized something vital that day. It wasn't that they forgot me. It was that they deliberately chose not to include me. And worse, they didn't even feel the need to hide it anymore. I sat in the parking lot for almost an hour, staring at my phone, scrolling through old messages, group texts, Facebook posts, calendar invites. Everything from the past few months started to make a horrifying sort of sense. The birthday dinner I'd never been told about. The group vacation they'd already booked by the time they mentioned it to me. The sudden coldness from people I used to be close with. It wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. And I was done pretending not to notice. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled out a notebook. I made a list. Names, obligations, favors. The quiet ways I'd been propping up this family like an unpaid intern. Dad's car insurance auto-drafted from my account. Mom's streaming subscriptions on my family plan. Jin's dog. I'd walked it every weekend for months when she was too busy. Cousin Ryan's job application. I'd rewritten his entire resume. I wasn't just forgotten. I was being used. And suddenly, I didn't feel like being useful anymore. I started with the little things. Quiet moves. Subtle. I removed a few shared accounts, changed my Netflix password, took myself off the family phone plan I'd been subsidizing since college. Nobody noticed. Not yet, but they would. Then came the bigger things. I pulled out the spreadsheet I'd kept of all the bills I'd paid over the years, the things I told myself didn't matter. And I drafted a few polite but firm emails. Not angry, just professional, detached. And then I made one final decision. Something personal, something symbolic. The kind of move that would say everything I'd never said out loud. The next family event was only a week away. Ellie's christening, formal church reception after. I was on the guest list this time. Surprisingly, probably because I still had the nicer camera and they wanted decent photos. I RSVP'd, smiled, played along. But what I had planned for that day, let's just say it ensured no one would ever forget me again. And that's where things really got interesting. The morning of Ellie's christening was bright and cloudless. The kind of spring day you only get a few times a year. The church was one of those old stone ones with stained glass windows and tall archways that made your footsteps echo. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp gray suit, the same one I'd worn to my cousin's wedding 2 years ago, the one I'd photographed for free because they couldn't afford a professional. I brought the camera, of course. Wouldn't want to break tradition. Inside, the pews were filling quickly. I saw Jin near the front whispering something to Mom and snickering. Dad caught my eye and gave me a curt nod. No smile, no warmth, just acknowledgement like I was the doorman at a hotel he barely recognized. I walked past them all and took a seat near the aisle where I'd have a clear shot for photos because even when they excluded me, I still knew how to play the part. But this time, I wasn't there just to take pictures. The service went smoothly. Ellie cried a bit when the priest poured the water over her head, but everyone cooed and clapped as if it were the climax of a Broadway show. I snapped a few shots, more out of habit than anything else. But while everyone was focused on the altar, I kept glancing at the front row. Jin, Mom, Dad, Cousin Rachel, Aunt Marie, all laughing, whispering, elbowing one another like they were in on some shared joke. I wasn't laughing, I was memorizing. After the ceremony, everyone headed to the church hall for the reception. It was modest, but well decorated. White tablecloths, flower centerpieces, a long buffet table lined with finger sandwiches, deviled eggs, and tiny cupcakes with pink frosting. The gift table was already overflowing. Someone had brought a giant plush elephant that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. I walked in with a canvas bag over my shoulder and a carefully wrapped box in my hand. I placed the box gently among the other gifts, then moved to the side of the room where the slideshow was looping. Baby bump photos, gender reveal parties, maternity shoots. My sister walked by me with a plate of food and muttered just loud enough for me to hear. Try not to be awkward this time. I didn't even look at her. I just smiled and said, Don't worry, I won't be invisible much longer. Her brow furrowed slightly, but she kept walking. Maybe she thought I was joking or bitter or just tired, but I meant every word. As everyone settled into their seats and the buffet line thinned out, the host, my cousin Rachel, stood up and clinked her glass for attention. We want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate sweet baby Ellie, she said, beaming. We've had so much love and support, and we're just so grateful to all of you. Polite applause, smiling faces. I stood by the edge of the room near the light switch. My fingers were already wrapped around the small remote I had in my pocket, one I'd synced to my laptop the night before. And now, Rachel continued, we'd love to share a short video tribute to all the people who made this possible, our amazing family. Some of you might recognize a few faces. She gestured to the projector and the slideshow faded to black. That's when my version began. At first, people didn't notice the difference. It started with a few innocent photos, family cookouts, birthdays, old reunions. But then the captions changed. 4th of July 2023. Everyone invited except Eric. Mom's birthday dinner. We thought you were busy. Family picnic 2025. Didn't anyone tell you? Each slide was time-stamped, dated, labeled. I'd pulled the screenshots from Facebook, texts, even that stupid family WhatsApp group I'd been removed from without explanation. The room began to shift. You could feel it. People craning their necks, whispering, glancing nervously toward Jin and Mom and Dad. Then came the real kicker, a slide that simply read, a running tab, followed by a spreadsheet. Itemized every expense, every favor, every small thing I'd paid for or contributed over the years. From Christmas dinners to loan repayments I never asked to be returned. Each row ended with a short note, never reimbursed, never thanked. By the time the total flashed on screen, the room was dead silent. $11,700. I let it hang there. No music, no voiceover, just cold numbers in a room full of people choking on awkwardness. The final slide was a photo of me smiling, holding a birthday cake, alone. The caption read, "Don't worry, I brought my own party." Then the screen faded to black. I stepped forward, the remote still in my hand. My voice was calm. Too calm, maybe. "Thank you for watching. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't forgotten this time." You could have heard a pin drop. Mom stood up, her face pale. "Eric, what was that?" I looked right at her. That was the truth. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Jin just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I turned to Rachel and handed her a USB that has all the original photos and files. "Feel free to delete them or keep them. Up to you." Then I picked up my canvas bag and started walking toward the door. People were whispering again. Except this time, it wasn't about how I was always late or too quiet. It was about what they'd just seen, about what they'd ignored, about what they'd allowed. Jin followed me out, her heels clicking angrily on the tile. "That was messed up, Eric. You humiliated the whole family." I stopped just outside the door and turned to her. "No, Jin." I reminded the family. "There's a difference." She crossed her arms. "What are you even trying to prove?" I took a breath. The kind you take before closing a door you know won't reopen. That I was here, that I mattered, that I'm done being the guy everyone remembers after the party's over. And then I left. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what happened next? What happened after that video? That was when the real fallout began. When the calls started. When the story started unraveling. When secrets got dragged out of the dark. And that's where things went from awkward to explosive. I didn't go home right away. I drove around the city with the windows down, letting the spring air hit my face, letting it cool the quiet storm inside me. I wasn't angry, not in the way I used to be, not the simmering kind of resentment that ate away at me in silence. No, what I felt now was something clearer, sharper, a strange kind of peace that only comes after a long overdue confrontation. I'd finally said it without shouting, without begging, without hoping someone would understand. I'd laid it all out and walked away on my terms. But peace has a way of shaking people who thrive on control. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had 9 missed calls. 2 from Mom, 1 from Dad, 4 from Jin, 1 from Rachel. 1 unknown number that I was pretty sure was Aunt Marie trying to disguise her call. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear excuses or tears or guilt trips. Not yet. Then the group chat was reborn. Yes, the same family group chat I'd been silently removed from 6 months earlier. Apparently, someone decided now would be the perfect time to read me. The notification popped up while I was making tea. "You've been added to family." The first message came from Jin. Okay, well, that slideshow was completely out of line. This was a baby's christening, not your therapy session. Then Mom chimed in. "Eric, honey, that was extremely hurtful. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Couldn't you have just spoken to us privately?" Rachel, "I get that you're upset, but airing all that at a baby shower? Not cool." And then came Dad. "Grow up." That was it. Just those 2 words. Grow up. No explanation, no apology. Just the man who'd let me cover his car repairs without a thank you telling me I needed to mature. For a moment, I stared at my phone. I was almost tempted to reply, to write a long, carefully worded essay breaking down every year of silent resentment, every moment of being passed over, every favor and smile I'd given freely, only to be dismissed like a seat filler at their lives. But then I realized no amount of words would matter. They'd already decided who I was. Quiet Eric, helpful Eric, the guy who never says no, the guy they only noticed when they needed something or when he dared to speak up. So I didn't respond. I left the group. That's when the text messages started rolling in, each more frantic than the last. Jin tried again. You made your point. Can you stop now? You're making it worse. Mom's came next. You've always been dramatic, but this is too much. We were just trying to protect you from feeling out of place. Protect me from my own family. And then Rachel, in her usual soft approach, maybe you could come over for dinner and we can talk. Just us. I ignored them all. I didn't want a half-hearted sit-down dinner where someone microwaved store-brand lasagna and pretended like it could soak up decades of neglect. I didn't want the weak smiles or the defensive jokes or the quick pivots to, can't we just move on? Because I wasn't moving on. Not yet. 3 days later, the real shift happened. It began with a call from my old coworker, Sam. Dude, he said, why is your sister asking about your job? What? She DM'd me on LinkedIn. Said she was concerned you were acting out and wanted to know if everything was okay at work. She asked if your mental health had been affecting your projects lately. I froze. She what? Sam sighed. I didn't say anything, but man, that's cold. Jin had never even visited my office. Never asked about my job unless she needed help making her resume look good. But now she was reaching out to my coworkers, trying to spin the narrative before I had the chance. That same night, I checked Facebook. The family was in damage control mode. Rachel had posted a long, heartfelt caption with a photo from the christening, conveniently cropped to exclude the slideshow incident. Family is everything. We may not be perfect, but we show up. And sometimes people lash out when they feel left out. Let's all remember to love each other through the hard times. The comment section was a minefield of passive-aggressive pity. Praying for your strength, Rachel. Some people just need attention. You're the bigger person. Keep being you. I didn't comment. I didn't even like it. But I screenshotted every last word. You see, what my family had never realized was that being quiet doesn't mean being clueless. That just because I wasn't the loudest voice in the room didn't mean I wasn't paying attention, watching, listening, remembering. So, while they scrambled to rewrite the story to paint me as unstable or bitter or selfish, I started preparing the next step. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but clarity. A kind of quiet justice. I started collecting receipts, not just emotional ones. Real ones. Bank statements, Venmo transactions, email threads, text messages, every favor, every cent, every moment where I'd stepped up and been treated like a doormat in return. And then something unexpected happened. Ellie's mother, Rachel's sister, Sophie, called me. We hadn't talked in months. Maybe a year. But she sounded different. Hesitant. Like someone who'd seen a building catch fire and wasn't sure if she should scream or grab a bucket. Eric, she said softly. I just wanted to say I saw what happened and I'm sorry. I blinked. You are. I wasn't part of that picnic. I wasn't invited either. Jin said it was just a small thing. But when I saw that slideshow, I realized how long you've been dealing with this. I didn't know what to say. It was the first time anyone had actually acknowledged it out loud. There are more people than you think, she continued, who've been pushed out, forgotten. You're not the only one. That stuck with me because suddenly this wasn't just about me. It wasn't just one ignored birthday or one family photo I wasn't in. It was a pattern, a family culture, one that picked favorites and discarded the rest like leftovers in the back of the fridge. I'd simply been the one to finally say something. And now people were watching. I started getting messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. An old uncle who lived 2 states away. Even my godmother who said she hadn't come to family gatherings in years because of the way they treated people like you. Every message strengthened my resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was the mirror they'd spent years avoiding. And now that I'd held it up, they were scrambling to shatter it. And that's when I knew I hadn't gone far enough. What came next? That was the part that truly made sure no one ever forgot me again. But if you want to hear what I did next and how the family's image of perfection completely imploded, just let me know because that is where the real fireworks started. I took a full week to disappear. Not from the world, just from them. I stopped responding to messages, muted the family members still blowing up my phone, and let the dust settle while they tore each other apart trying to assign blame. Jin tried calling me 6 more times. Mom left 2 long voicemails full of fake concern, thinly disguised as emotional blackmail. This family has been through so much, Eric. Don't throw it away over a misunderstanding. My favorite was Dad's blunt message. You embarrassed your mother. Fix it. I didn't fix anything. I went quiet because I was working, planning. Not a tantrum, not an outburst, but a full, calm, calculated reckoning. You see, I knew my family well enough to predict exactly how they'd behave. They'd try to discredit me, smear me quietly behind the scenes, patch up their image publicly while calling me unstable in private. But I had something they never expected. Documentation. Remember that spreadsheet from the slideshow? That was just the tip of the iceberg. I pulled every receipt. Every email I'd sent to help Rachel's husband land his first job after his DUI. Every time I transferred money to help Mom with unexpected bills. The years of payments for Dad's car insurance. The time I bailed Jin out of a credit card hole so deep she had 3 collectors calling her in 1 week. They never even said thank you. Not once. I compiled it all into a neat, clean, factual document. No insults, no accusations, just truth, a timeline, a pattern. And for each line, I added a short quote or message they'd sent at the time. Messages that showed the imbalance. Eric, can you just do this one thing? You're always so helpful. Nobody else has the time. At the end of the document, I wrote only this. I did all of this not because I had to, but because I thought I was part of a family. I see now that I was just a resource. I'm no longer available for that role. Consider this my resignation letter from the unpaid position of family doormat. Then I uploaded it to a shared Google Drive and I sent it to everyone, not just the core family group. I sent it to the extended family too. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, even the ones who hadn't spoken to me in years, especially them. I included a simple email header. In case anyone's curious why I won't be at the next close family gathering. That was it. The response was swift. Started small. A few texts from extended cousins I barely remembered. Messages like, "Damn, I had no idea," or, "This explains so much." One even said, "You just wrote what half the family's been thinking for years." Then came the fallout. Mom called again, this time angry, furious, even, "How dare you air our private affairs to everyone? That was family business." I calmly replied, "Exactly." And for the first time, the whole family's in on it. She hung up. Jin exploded in the group chat, calling me manipulative, vindictive, and obsessed with playing the victim. But her tantrum only made things worse for her because people started chiming in. Sophie reminded everyone that Jin had deliberately excluded her from events. 2. My cousin Leo posted screenshots of Jin mocking another relative in a private chat. Aunt Marie, bless her, said what everyone else was thinking. This might have been uncomfortable, but it needed to be said. Dad didn't respond at all. He went silent. That's how I knew it had landed. He only shuts up when he knows he's cornered. What really tipped the scales, though, was when Rachel's husband, remember the guy I helped land his job, replied to the email with a single sentence. "You're not wrong, Eric. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." That cracked the dam. People started opening up, sharing their own stories of being snubbed, dismissed, used. It was like the family's perfect little facade had been pierced and everyone could finally breathe. Within days, the family's carefully curated image began to crumble. The matching shirt picnics, the all-smiles photo dumps, the fake unity, it was all smoke and mirrors. And now the smoke was clearing. And as for me, I didn't return to the family functions. I didn't respond to the passive-aggressive invitations or the olive branch texts meant to make them feel better without ever apologizing. I stayed out and it was peaceful. I took up hiking again, reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with while juggling family obligations. I even started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I finally had space to unpack everything I'd shoved down for decades. A few months later, something happened that might have shattered me in the past. Mom ended up in the hospital for a minor surgery. Nothing life-threatening, but Jin called me, clearly expecting me to drop everything and rush over. "You're still her son, Eric." I paused before answering. "No," I said. "I was a son to people who treated me like one. I don't know who you and Mom decided I was, but I'm not that anymore." Then I blocked her. A week later, Rachel emailed me, not to guilt trip, but to genuinely apologize. She said she didn't realize how bad things had gotten, and she was sorry for being complicit. I didn't fully forgive her, but I appreciated the honesty. I told her so. We didn't pretend everything was fine. That was the first real adult conversation I'd had with a family member in years. And the best part, Ellie, little baby Ellie, grew up never knowing me as the family ghost. I sent her a birthday gift anyway, not out of guilt, not to buy my way in, but because I still believed in doing things for the right reasons, just not for the wrong people. Eventually, the calls stopped. The messages stopped, the invitations stopped, and I smiled every time one didn't come. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't a helper, a ghost, a wallet, a plus one. I was Eric, the guy who stopped apologizing for taking up space. And trust me, they never forgot me again. They couldn't. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My name's Mark, and I just turned 30. You'd think after 3 decades on this earth, you'd be able to read people better, especially someone you've lived with, someone you've shared a bed with, cooked dinner with, watched bad TV with on rainy nights. But nope. Life still has a way of blindsiding you. I met Ela 4 years ago at a mutual friend's art show. She wore this ridiculous lime green coat like she was daring the room to look away from her. I liked that she had bite, too. She called me out for pretending to understand abstract art when I was clearly just nodding at colors. That kind of honesty was rare. At least it felt that way. Over time, I fell in love with her chaos. The unpredictability, the energy, the way she could walk into a dull party and light it up just by laughing too loudly. We moved in together after a year, got a little apartment just outside the city. It wasn't fancy, but it had a balcony, creaky floors, and enough room for her plants and my books. She called it our treehouse because it felt like a world suspended above everyone else's mess. But lately, that treehouse had started to rot. Started slow. First, she got distant. Nothing dramatic, just quieter. The kind of silence you don't notice until one day you realize your conversations have turned into logistics. "Can you grab eggs? Your package came. I'll be late." I chalked it up to stress. She had taken a marketing job she didn't love, and I was working long hours at a startup that felt like it might fold any second. Life happens, right? You get tired. You forget to hold hands. You forget to ask how their day really was. But then came the lies. Not obvious ones. The slick kind. The ones you almost believe because you want to. Girls' night turning into unanswered texts until 2 a.m. Going to the gym, but coming back without a drop of sweat or even wearing different clothes. Receipts stuffed into the trash from bars we never went to. When I asked her, she'd flip it, say I was being paranoid, controlling, insecure. She'd laugh it off, call me Dad. In that sarcastic way she knew made me bristle. Then she started planting little seeds in my head. "You're not bored, are you?" She'd ask too casually. Or, "Do you ever wonder if this is it?" I'd laugh, try to joke it away, but my chest would tighten every time. I was trying so hard to keep things normal. I'd cook her favorite meals, surprise her with little weekend trips, even clean the entire apartment top to bottom one weekend while she was visiting her cousin. She came home and barely noticed. The kicker came a few weeks before my birthday. I asked her if she wanted to do something low-key, maybe just us, a little dinner, or even just take out and a movie. She smiled, that old spark flickering behind her eyes for the first time in weeks, and said, "Nope, you're not planning anything this year. It's on me. Trust me, you're going to get the surprise of your life." I laughed. I wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe she still cared enough to plan something. Maybe things weren't as broken as they felt. Maybe this was her way of making up for the distance. Except something didn't sit right. The next few days she was giddy. Like weirdly so. She'd leave early in the mornings, come home late, always on her phone. She started packing little bags that she said were for a donation drop. But I never saw her actually take them anywhere. I asked about it once and she said I was being nosy. I let it go because deep down I already knew. I just didn't want to say it out loud. So I started planning something of my own. See, the lease for our apartment was up for renewal at the end of the month. I handled most of the paperwork since she always claimed she was allergic to admin. Normally, we'd sign together, but this time I didn't bring it up. Instead, I called the landlord and told him we'd be vacating at the end of the lease. I paid the termination fee out of my own pocket, quietly, carefully. Then I got a storage unit and started moving my stuff little by little. The books, my PC setup, old photos, even the rug in my office. She never noticed. I hated every time she was out with the girls. I was boxing up another piece of the life she clearly didn't want. The night before my birthday, she was buzzing around like she was about to win a game I didn't know we were playing. She barely looked at me, but when she did, it was with this smug little grin. "You ready for tomorrow?" she asked, running her fingers along my shoulder. "I hope so. It's going to be big." I wanted to say something, maybe ask her to stop playing whatever game this was. But instead, I nodded and went to bed early. She stayed up. I could hear her laughing on FaceTime with someone, the voice low and male. I didn't say a word. The next day, I worked from a cafe. Didn't want to be around for whatever her surprise was. Around noon, I got a text. "Be home at 6 o'clock. Dress nice. No peeking." I almost laughed. I waited until 6:15. Then I walked up the stairs of the apartment building we'd called home for nearly 3 years and opened the door to silence. No streamers, no candles, no Ela. Just air, emptiness. And on the table where I thought maybe she'd left a gift or a card, there was just my phone buzzing. One message: "You'll be fine. I'm in Miami with someone better." No joke, no explanation, not even a name, just that. I stood there reading it 3 times like the words might change. Like maybe I'd misread it. But nope, she really did it. And the thing is, I didn't even get angry. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled because while she was tanning on some stranger's yacht, thinking she just pulled the ultimate move, she had no idea the lease was gone. The apartment was empty. The utilities were cut off as of the next morning. I opened my email, found the draft I'd pre-written a week ago, and hit send. Subject line: "Lease termination. Effective immediately." Attached: a confirmation notice from the landlord, the move-out inspection schedule, and a note that said, "Tenant has vacated the premises." I left the apartment, locking the door behind me just as a neighbor walked past with a curious glance. I smiled, nodded, and took one last look at the treehouse that had rotted from the inside out. She still doesn't know it yet, but soon she will. I didn't go straight to my new place that night. I took a long walk instead. No destination in mind, just the rhythm of my steps and the hum of the city to keep me grounded. My phone buzzed a few more times. I didn't check it. I already knew it wouldn't be from her. Ela had made her choice, and for once, I wasn't going to chase after someone who ran at the first sign of effort. She wanted the thrill, the drama, the spotlight. I wanted peace. And after years of feeling like I was constantly auditioning just to be loved by her, I was finally done performing. Around 9 p.m., I walked into a little diner I used to go to back when I first moved to the city. Ordered a slice of pie and a coffee. It was nothing fancy, just a plate, a fork, and a moment to breathe. And it hit me right then. This was the best birthday I'd had in years. No forced laughter, no fake smiles, no guessing what version of Ela I'd come home to. Just me, alone but free, with the quiet kind of satisfaction that only comes when you know you took your power back. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of chaos. Voicemails, missed calls, a few texts, all from Ela. At first, it was the usual smugness. "Ela at 9 a.m. So, I'm guessing you're feeling stupid now. I didn't expect you to be so chill about it. Kind of cold, to be honest. Don't worry. I'll get my stuff when I'm back. Shouldn't take more than an hour." But by noon, the tone had shifted. Ela voicemails at 12 p.m. Why is the Wi-Fi off? Did you forget to pay the rent? Mark, the power's out. Why won't the door key work? I could almost picture her in real time, coming back from her weekend stunt, rolling her luggage down the hallway in her Instagram perfect outfit, heels clicking on the linoleum floor, only to find the place dark, the locks changed, and her world suddenly off script. Then came the call. I let it go to voicemail. Mark, what is going on? I just got here and the landlord says the lease is terminated. Are you insane? You can't just do that without telling me. Where's my stuff? Did you touch my stuff? This better be a joke. Call me back right now or I swear. Click. I didn't call her back. Instead, I sent one text. Your things are in storage. Unit 48B. Paid through the end of the month. After that, they're your responsibility. 10 minutes later, she called again. Then again. Then her mom called me. I ignored them all. By 2 p.m., she had escalated to full nuclear. I listened to her voicemail. You had no right. You can't just erase me from our home like that. What kind of man does that without even having the decency to talk to me? You're so petty. No wonder you could never keep up with me. No wonder, huh? That phrase stuck with me because in her mind, I was always just barely good enough, just barely interesting enough, smart enough, successful enough. Meanwhile, she spent 4 years dancing on the edge of commitment, always holding her options like playing cards she could drop at any moment. The rest of the week passed in waves. She showed up at my office once, made a scene in the lobby before security asked her to leave. She sent me an email with a long, passive-aggressive reflection on how I had emotionally abandoned her long before she booked a ticket to Miami. I didn't respond to that either because here's the thing. For a long time, I thought love was about endurance, about sticking through the mess, waiting for people to change, carrying the weight of someone else's chaos, and calling it being there for them. But it's not. Love, real love, isn't supposed to feel like you're being tested every day to see if you'll still be picked. I was done waiting to be picked. A week later, I got a text from her best friend, Nadia. We'd always gotten along well enough, and she never really hid the fact that she thought Ela was reckless. She texted, "Hey, just wanted to say that was savage, but deserved. She's been a nightmare since she got back. Told everyone you were obsessed and would never leave. Haha." I didn't reply, but I did smile. Then came the kicker. 2 weeks after the lease termination, Ela posted a story, her at some rooftop bar with that same smug smile, holding a cocktail with the caption, "Sometimes you got to lose the good ones to realize you were the problem." No tag, no apology, just that. But the comments? They weren't buying it. Wait, isn't this the girl who ditched her boyfriend on his birthday for a trip? She did what? Yikes. Girl, that's not the flex you think it is. That's when I knew the story was spreading. People were connecting dots. Friends of friends started reaching out saying they'd heard what happened. One guy I hadn't spoken to since college texted me, "Bro, is that real? Tell me that's real." Oh, it was real. And I wasn't done yet, because there was one more thing she didn't know. Something I hadn't told anyone yet. Something that would hit her in the one place she still thought she had power. I waited exactly 1 month before dropping the final domino. The timing mattered, not out of spite, but out of strategy. Ela needed to believe she still had the last word. That she ditched me, jetted off to Miami with someone better, and come home to find me sulking in some sad corner of the city, licking my wounds. She needed that version of reality to make herself feel like the winner. And I let her have it for 30 days. In that time, I didn't post a single thing. No updates, no cryptic quotes, no stories of gym progress or new beginnings. Total radio silence. Let her imagination do the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, I was quietly building my next move. You see, one thing Ela never cared to ask me about was the side project I'd been pouring my late nights into. An app one co-founded with a friend from college. Back when we started dating, I mentioned it once and she'd shrugged. "Tech stuff is so boring," she said. "Let me know when you invent something fun like a teleportation app." She never asked about it again. Not even when I stayed up until 3 a.m. for beta testing. Not when I took unpaid weekends to fly to networking events. She assumed it was a hobby. Another one of my Mark things, as she liked to call them. But what she didn't know was that 6 days before my birthday, we finalized a seed round with a major VC firm. A deal worth $1.2 million. My co-founder and I signed the papers at a tiny ramen shop in Brooklyn. I took a photo of the moment. I almost sent it to her, but I waited. Now, a month later, the press release was ready. My name front and center, not just as a co-founder, but as the face of the product. Tech sites picked it up, local news ran a segment, and my inbox exploded overnight. I timed it to go live on the exact date our old lease officially ended. Symbolic, maybe, but it felt right. The next morning, I woke up to 37 new messages. Ila wasn't one of them, but her friends were. Nadia texted first. "Holy, this is you. She is losing it right now. I mean, screaming. She just found out." Apparently, someone had tagged her in a congratulatory post about me. She clicked the link and saw the article, my photo, my name, the words innovative, visionary, and multi-million-dollar deal floating just beneath a headshot she once made fun of because she said I looked too serious. I could only imagine the look on her face. At 10 a.m., I finally got the text I'd been waiting for. Ila texted, "Wow, so this is what you were really doing while pretending to be busy all the time. I guess congratulations are in order." I stared at the screen for a minute. No anger, no panic, just that familiar tone she always used when she realized she no longer held the upper hand. I typed a response. I replied, "Thanks, and yeah, I was busy building a life, one you clearly didn't want to be part of." She replied in under 30 seconds, "Don't act like I didn't support you. I just didn't know it was serious. I was stressed too, you know. I needed space. I didn't mean to hurt you." There it was, the slow backpedal, the revisionist history. She wanted to rewrite what happened. She wanted to paint herself as impulsive, not cruel. Lost, not manipulative. And maybe a year ago I would have bought it. Maybe I'd have taken the bait, met for coffee, given her the chance to explain. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted the ramen shop photo on my Instagram. No caption, just a simple smiling emoji. Within 10 minutes, she viewed my story. 15 minutes later, she blocked me. That night, Nadia sent me one more message. "Just so you know," she told her friends, "you were emotionally unavailable and that she had to leave to find herself. But now she's trying to spin it like you blindsided her by going silent." I almost laughed. Classic. But then Nadia added one more thing. Also, her Miami guy, he bailed 2 days after she got there. Said she was too intense and left her with the hotel bill. She maxed out 2 cards getting back. I only know because she tried to get me to Venmo her just a little something to float until payday. I leaned back in my chair and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Ila was spinning stories, trying to control the narrative, still playing the same old game. But I wasn't in it anymore. My life wasn't a game she could win or lose. It was mine. And the best part? I didn't need revenge. Not really. Because the silence, the success, the fact that I never raised my voice or begged her to stay, that's what would haunt her. That's what would echo in every room she walked into. In every conversation where someone said, "Wait, wasn't he your ex?" I didn't burn the bridge. I just walked away from it while it crumbled behind me. It's funny how people always assume revenge has to be loud. That it needs to be some dramatic scene. Glass breaking, voices raised, doors slammed. But in my experience, the most effective revenge is quiet. No fire, no fury, just calm, calculated closure. You don't yell, you don't argue, you just remove yourself and let the silence do all the talking. After that final text from Ila, the one where she tried to paint herself as the victim, talking about how she needed space, I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to see the life she walked out on continue to unfold without her. I wanted her to scroll through her feed, see the smiles, the wins, the small joys, and realize she wasn't part of the picture anymore. Not because I pushed her out, but because she handed over her place with both hands, chasing whatever she thought would feel better than stability, love, and loyalty. In the weeks that followed, things moved fast. Our app launched. The VC money gave us a solid runway to hire a full-time dev team and expand the product in a way we never could before. My name started popping up in niche tech articles, newsletters, even a couple podcasts. My LinkedIn blew up. Every morning, I'd sip my coffee while reading connection requests from people who used to roll their eyes when I talked about my little startup idea. It wasn't just external validation. It was internal. For years, I had doubted myself, wondered if I was too safe, too boring, too careful. Those were words Ela liked to use when she was frustrated. She wanted adventure, risk, the thrill of newness. I wanted peace. Turns out peace is a lot more valuable when you're the one who has to rebuild everything from scratch. Nadia and I kept in touch. It started with casual messages. She'd forward me a meme or I'd send her a song I heard on Spotify that reminded me of the weird jazz bar we all used to go to. One night, we got drinks. No pressure, no weirdness. Just two people laughing about how messy the past had been and how absurd it was that we had ended up on the same side of it. At one point that night, she leaned in and said, "You know, she never thought you'd make it, right? She used to say you were too scared to bet on yourself, that you'd just keep floating in the safe lane forever." I smiled. Then it's a good thing I stopped listening. The thing is, I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I didn't hate Ela. I didn't wish her pain or failure. I just didn't care anymore. And that was the real win. Because when you truly move on, they don't get to live rent-free in your head. You don't daydream about confrontations or comebacks. You just live. But that doesn't mean the universe doesn't have a wicked sense of timing. About 2 months after the birthday fiasco, I was invited to a private networking dinner hosted by one of our angel investors. It was in this sleek downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, champagne flowing, a string quartet in the corner. All that startup meets old money type of vibe. I felt out of place for about 5 minutes until one of the investors pulled me into a conversation and introduced me as one of the most promising founders in our portfolio. I was mid-sentence explaining our product roadmap to a guy from some VC fund when I caught a glimpse of someone across the room. My heart didn't drop. My stomach didn't clench. I didn't freeze. I just blinked. It was Ela. She looked different. Still beautiful in that effortless, chaotic way, but there was a tension in her smile I hadn't seen before, like she was holding her breath behind her lipstick. Her eyes scanned the room, laughing too quickly at jokes, adjusting her dress every few seconds like she wasn't sure it fit her anymore. We didn't make eye contact. Not at first, but eventually she saw me. There was this flicker of recognition. Her posture stiffened. She looked at the guy she was talking to, then back at me. I gave her a small nod, nothing more. Then I turned back to my conversation like she was just another face in a very expensive room. 10 minutes later, she walked over. "Mark," she said, her voice soft, unsure. I turned. "Ela." She hesitated. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I was invited," I said casually. "Our firm just closed another round." "Right?" she said, looking around. "I read about it. Congrats." "Thanks." There was a pause. She looked down at her wine glass, then back up at me. "You look good," she said like she was surprised. "So do you," I said. It wasn't a lie, but I didn't say it like it mattered. She waited like maybe I'd ask how she'd been. Like I'd offer her some opening to explain or reminisce or pretend we still had something in common. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "How's Miami?" She flinched just slightly. "Didn't work out." I nodded. "Figured." Another long pause. Then she said, "You know, I didn't think you'd actually move out. I thought you'd beg me to come back." I laughed, quiet but real. "Yeah, I figured you did." "Why didn't you?" she asked. It wasn't accusatory. It was confused. Like someone asking why the sun didn't rise that morning. I shrugged. "Because I finally realized I didn't have to prove anything. You left." That was the answer. She looked at me for a long time like she was trying to find some crack in my calm. Some sign that I was still hurt, still waiting for closure. But there was nothing because I had already given it to myself. "Well," she said, adjusting her bag, "I hope you're happy." "I am," and I meant it. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. She gave me a half-hearted smile and turned away. As she walked off, I felt nothing but relief. No anger, no pride, just clarity. Later that night, as the dinner wound down, I found myself on the balcony with a glass of whiskey, the city lights blinking below me. Nadia joined me, leaned on the railing beside me. "I saw her talking to you," she said. "Yeah," I said, sipping my drink. "She said she hopes I'm happy." "Are you?" I turned to look at her. Yeah, I really am. She smiled. Good. Because you deserve to be. We stood there in silence for a while, the hum of the party behind us, the night stretching ahead. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't been sure of in years. I didn't just survive what she did to me. I grew because of it. And sometimes that's the best revenge of all. Not making them regret losing you, but becoming someone who never needed them in the first place. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Hey, I'm Emily, and this is how my life went from normal to completely upside down in a matter of months. I had been married to Rick for 7 years. On paper, we had it all. A nice home, a steady income, and what I thought was a pretty strong relationship. But in hindsight, there were signs, little things I ignored or chalked up to him just being busy. Turns out, I was blind to what was really happening behind my back. It all started around the time I hit a career milestone. I had been working as a marketing manager at a tech company, and I had worked my butt off to get where I was. But then Rick came to me with an idea. He said, I think it would be best for our marriage if you quit your job. We need more time together, and I need you here with me. I was taken aback. He had always been supportive of my career. We had even talked about how we balanced both our jobs and our relationship. But now it felt like he was suddenly pushing me to quit. He said that working all the time was starting to hurt our marriage. I mean, we had a nice life, but he wasn't wrong in saying that I was stressed and stretched thin. Still, it felt like an odd request. But he was so insistent. It's just temporary, he promised. We'll be happier if you focus on us. After a lot of back and forth, I gave in. I thought maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to put our relationship first. So, I handed in my resignation and started focusing on being there for Rick, cooking dinner, planning weekend getaways, and being the wife he always wanted. I didn't even question it too much. I trusted him. But looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. What did I really give up, and why did he need me to be so available? Months passed, and the pressure of living in a constant state of togetherness started to weigh on me. Rick wasn't the same. He started getting distant, working late, being distracted, leaving his phone face down when I was around. I told myself it was just stress from work, but in my gut, I knew something wasn't right. And then one night he dropped a bombshell. I'm in love with someone else, he said, sitting me down on the couch. The words hung in the air like a thick fog. I just stared at him, completely numb. My mind was racing, but I couldn't even process what was happening. What? I whispered. I'm sorry, Em, he said, voice shaking slightly. But it's true. I've been seeing someone else. She's younger. I've fallen for her, and I think it's time for us to go our separate ways. I couldn't speak. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the room. All the sacrifices, all the effort I put into our life together, it meant nothing. He had checked out without even giving me a real chance. I don't know what to say. I finally choked out. And then he said something that felt like a knife to my heart. You should have focused on us. I didn't want to have to ask you to quit your job, but you never made time for me. This is your fault too, you know? And with that, he stood up, walked out the door, and left me with nothing but his words ringing in my ears. But what he didn't know was that he had just opened a door I hadn't seen coming. For the next few days, I felt like I was in a daze. I had just lost the man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. And worse, I had sacrificed my career for a man who couldn't even be honest with me. But then it hit me. There was one thing I could do. I could make sure the other woman knew exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. So I did some digging. Her name was Sarah. She was in her mid-20s, and from what I could gather, she worked in marketing at a small firm downtown. Rick had told me she was just someone he met through work, but I knew better. I knew exactly who she was. I found her Instagram, it wasn't hard, and the photos they had posted together made me sick. There they were, smiling like a picture-perfect couple, not knowing the truth about the man they both loved. I needed to talk to her. I sent her a simple message, one that was calm but direct. Hi Sarah. My name is Emily, and I'm Rick's wife. I'm sorry to do this, but I think you deserve to know that he's been married to me for 7 years. He's been lying to both of us, and I wanted to make sure you knew the truth. The reply came quickly. What? It was short, but I could hear the shock in her words. I know this is a lot, but I just wanted you to be aware of who you're involved with. I continued. Rick's been lying to you about his life, and I think you deserve to know he's been cheating on me for months. I could hear her starting to freak out. You're telling me Rick's married? Why didn't he say anything? I sighed, not sure what to expect. I don't know, but I don't want you to waste any more time on a man who isn't being honest with you. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched on, and I could practically feel Sarah's brain working through everything I had just told her. I wasn't sure if she was angry, shocked, or just confused, maybe all three. But when she finally responded, her voice was shaky but determined. I need to talk to him. This isn't possible. I don't know what to say to you right now, but I appreciate you telling me. I can't believe he lied to me like this. I could tell she was trying to process everything, but I wasn't going to let her off the hook. Look, I get that this is a lot, but don't let him manipulate you like he did me. I thought I knew who he was too. I gave up my career, my independence, all for him, and he didn't even hesitate to throw me away. There was a brief pause before Sarah spoke again, this time in a firmer tone. I'll call him. He needs to explain this to me. I didn't waste any time. I knew I had done all I could to warn her, but the truth was, he needed to face the consequences of his actions. The next part of the plan wasn't in my hands anymore. It was up to Sarah. I didn't hear from Sarah the rest of that day, but I was glued to my phone, half expecting a call or a message from Rick. The silence was deafening. He hadn't even tried to reach out to me. That was a red flag, wasn't it? I should have been angry, but I was strangely calm. Maybe I'd already gone numb from the shock. Maybe the years of living under his control had prepared me for this moment. The following morning, I got the call. It was Sarah. Emily, he's gone, she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. I confronted him. He packed his things and left. Said he couldn't deal with the lies anymore, that he was in love with me, and now he's gone. He's not coming back to either of us. I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't exactly the sweet revenge I imagined, but it felt damn good. You're better off without him, trust me, I said, my voice steady. I never thought he'd do this to me, Sarah admitted, sounding defeated. I can't believe I wasted so much time on him. I didn't know whether I should console her or just hang up and move on. I'd warned her after all, but it didn't matter now. Rick had dug his own grave, but I wasn't done yet. Rick thought he could just leave me with nothing. No career, no income, no way of moving forward. He thought I'd fall apart, that I would beg him to come back. But instead, I made a decision right then and there. If he thought I'd be stuck at home playing the role of the abandoned wife, he was wrong. Dead wrong. I didn't rush into anything, no impulsive decisions, no hasty moves. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. Rick had taken everything from me, but I was about to get it all back. I started by reaching out to my old company. The marketing job I had quit felt like a distant memory, but I had the skills, and I wasn't about to let Rick's selfishness define me. The next few days were a blur of emails, phone calls, and getting back into the professional world. It felt strange, exhilarating even, like I was building a new life from scratch. A few weeks passed, and life started to feel like it was moving forward. I was getting callbacks from companies, a few job offers here and there. My confidence was slowly coming back, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I started to feel like me again. I was making my own decisions, living my own life, and Rick was nothing but a distant memory. But of course, the calm before the storm never lasts. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the message from him. Rick. I saw his name pop up on my phone and immediately felt a wave of unease. It had been weeks since we'd last spoken. His absence had almost become normal, but the idea of him reaching out again felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't want to read it, I told myself. I didn't need to, but curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the message. Emily, I've made a huge mistake. I need you to listen. I want us to try again. You were right about everything. Sarah and I were not going to work. She wasn't what I thought. I can't live without you. Please, let's fix this. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. The audacity. The nerve. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. After everything he had put me through, he actually thought that after all this, I would just welcome him back with open arms? I didn't respond, not right away. Instead, I let the message sit there, the words swirling in my head until they stopped feeling like anything at all. But Rick wasn't done. A few hours later, I got another message, then another, and another. He was practically begging, pleading for me to hear him out. I finally snapped. You think you can just come back after all of this? I typed, furious but calm. You ruined everything. You left me for someone else, and now you're trying to come back because she's not what you thought? Newsflash. Rick, you don't get to pick and choose when you want to be a part of my life. I didn't hold back. I poured out everything I had bottled up over the past few months. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger. And in the middle of that emotional storm, a thought struck me. What if he still doesn't understand what he's lost? What if he thinks he can walk away from me, go back to his little perfect life, and have everything work out for him? I decided then and there that he needed to understand just how far I'd come without him. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing he still had any control over me. The next day, I was invited to an event with one of the companies I'd interviewed with. It was a high-profile networking event, an opportunity that could take my career to new heights. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but the invitation was too big to pass up. As I prepared for the evening, I found myself thinking more about Rick. The nerve of him. He didn't deserve a second chance. And so I decided to turn the tables. I called Sarah. The phone rang twice before she picked up, her voice still laced with confusion and hurt. Emily? She asked, sounding surprised. What's going on? I need to tell you something, I said, my tone calm but deliberate. I know Rick's been contacting you, telling you how much he messed up, how he wants to come back to me. There was a pause. What? He told me he was done with you. He said you were the one who wasn't right for him. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, that's what he told me too. He thought he could just walk away, leaving me with nothing, and go back to you because you were younger. But here's the thing, Sarah, he messed up. He messed up so bad that he's now scrambling to fix everything. And I'm not going to let him think he can just come crawling back. What are you doing? Sarah asked, her voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. What's your plan? I smiled to myself. I'm going to show him what he really gave up. You see, Sarah, you've been used and you've been hurt just like I was. He's going to pay for what he did, but I need your help. Sarah didn't ask any more questions. She was on board. And that's when I started putting my plan into motion. I'd been doing some digging, of course, nothing major, but I'd found a few things I could use. Things that would help me build the perfect storm of consequences for Rick. He thought he could walk away and start fresh, playing the role of the victim while I was left to pick up the pieces. But he had no idea how much I knew or how much I had the power to unravel. It wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about showing him the true extent of his actions. I wanted him to understand that this wasn't just a minor inconvenience for him. No, he was going to lose everything, and he was going to realize that everything he had, I'd helped him build. I already knew Rick's boss, Valerie, through some of the connections I had made during our time together. She'd always seemed like a strong, no-nonsense woman who didn't put up with crap. I had the perfect ammunition. You see, Valerie had been around when Rick first started working for her company. She knew how much he'd grown, how much his career had flourished because of the opportunities one had helped him seize. I had helped him build his image, helped him become that ideal employee. But that image was about to crumble, and I had just the right person to help me knock it down. I picked up the phone, dialed her number, and waited for her to pick up. When she did, I wasted no time. Hey, Valerie, I greeted her, keeping my tone light but purposeful. This is Emily, Rick's ex-wife. Emily, she said, sounding a little surprised. How are you? Well, I'm doing much better now. Thanks for asking, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I was actually wondering if I could talk to you about something that happened a while ago. Something that might concern you, given the recent changes around Rick. There was a brief pause on the other end. I could almost hear her interest peaking. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in, a smile playing at the edge of my lips. "I'm sure you've heard the rumors about Rick and his relationship with Sarah. But what you probably don't know is that it wasn't just a breakup. You see, Rick had been cheating on me for months before he left, and he was seeing Sarah while still with me. I think it's important that you know the kind of person you're dealing with. It's not just about what he did to me. It's about what he's been hiding. If you value integrity in your workplace, I think you should know the kind of man he is, and I'm not sure you want someone like him representing your company." The silence on the other end was deafening, and I could almost picture Valerie's face as she processed what I just said. Finally, she spoke again, her voice sharp and controlled. "You're saying he was cheating on you while he was working here?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Exactly. And I know you value loyalty and trust in your company. Do you really want someone like Rick working for you? Knowing he's been hiding his personal life from you and your employees?" She hesitated. "I'll look into it. Thanks for bringing this to my attention, Emily. I'll let you know if I have any other questions." I hung up, feeling an immediate rush of satisfaction. That was the first part of my plan in motion. Over the next few days, things began to fall into place. It wasn't long before I heard from Sarah again. "He's gone," she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. "I don't know how you did it, but I guess Rick thought his new life with me was going to be perfect. But when Valerie found out, she fired him. She said she didn't want people like him in her company, and she made it clear that his dishonesty would not be tolerated." I let out a low laugh. "I told you, Sarah. Rick didn't just burn bridges with me, he burned them with everyone. He's going to find out the hard way that his actions have consequences." I didn't expect that," Sarah admitted, sounding both relieved and somewhat vindicated. "I honestly didn't think you'd be able to do all of this. But thank you. He had it coming." "Oh, trust me," I said, a grin creeping up on my face. "He's going to have a lot more to lose before this is over." And I wasn't kidding. Rick had thought he could walk away and get a fresh start, that I'd be stuck picking up the pieces of my shattered life. But what he hadn't counted on was me rising from the ashes, and what he definitely hadn't counted on was everyone finding out what a selfish, manipulative person he really was. The worst part for him? He still hadn't figured out the final move in my plan. The days after Rick lost his job felt almost surreal. I could already feel the momentum building, everything falling into place like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that only I could see. I could hear it in his voice when he called me, still in shock, trying to reach out for some kind of pity from me, but I wasn't having any of it. "Emily, listen, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to understand, it wasn't like I planned it," Rick pleaded over the phone, his voice a mix of desperation and guilt. "Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "You think I'm going to feel bad for you? You think I'm going to go back to being the woman who always cleaned up your messes? I'm not that person anymore." I could hear him sigh on the other end, probably trying to find the right words to win me back. But nothing he said was going to change anything. He'd made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The only thing left for me was to make sure everyone knew exactly who Rick was. It was time to pull the final card. I had a pretty good following on social media, nothing huge, but enough that I could make a statement if I wanted to. The world could see exactly what kind of man Rick really was. So I started gathering everything I could. I knew Rick had made a point of showing off his perfect life with Sarah on his Instagram. He had been bragging about how much better things were, how free he felt. He posted pictures of their dates, their vacations, all those moments meant to paint a picture of happiness. But what he didn't know was that I had kept copies of all the messages he'd sent me during our marriage. I kept the ones where he talked about his infidelity, those late-night texts to other women while telling me he was working late. I had everything. Screenshots of his conversations, photos of his lies, and even details about how he had tried to cover up his affair with Sarah, pretending it wasn't happening. I was going to expose it all. So I spent the next few days crafting the perfect post. It wasn't just about telling my side of the story. No, I wanted to make sure the whole world saw Rick for the coward he really was. I started with a simple caption. "This is what happens when trust is broken. Let the world know who you really are, Rick." And then I attached the screenshots, the messages, the photos, the proof that he'd been cheating on me with Sarah while pretending to be the devoted husband. I tagged Rick in the post, made sure to include a few key hashtags because if this was going to blow up, it needed to reach the right people. The moment I hit post, my heart raced. I knew this was it. This was the moment when Rick's life would spiral completely out of control. There was no coming back from this. It didn't take long for the post to blow up. The first comment came from an old friend of Rick's. "Is this real? I thought Rick was one of the good guys. What the hell?" Then more comments came flooding in, people who knew him, people I hadn't spoken to in years, joining the conversation. The messages were full of disbelief. Some of them, in a weird way, actually blamed me. "Why didn't you leave him sooner? You should have fought harder for him." But I didn't care. I was past caring about their opinions. They weren't the ones who'd been betrayed. The second wave came, though, and that's when it hit Rick hard. His friends, his supposed brothers from the gym, they started turning on him. The ones who had respected him, admired him for his family man image, those were the people who started commenting, asking why they hadn't known the truth. One by one, they backed out. The comments got uglier. "I can't believe you do this to Emily. You were family. You should be ashamed of yourself." I could almost hear Rick screaming at his phone as he read through them. But the real kicker came when Sarah saw the post. I'd expected her to defend him, to double down on the lies and pretend like everything was still fine. But I was wrong. She messaged me not long after the post went live. "I had no idea," she wrote, her words full of regret. "I thought he was honest with me. He told me he was done with you, that everything was over. I had no idea he was still lying to both of us. I'm so sorry." I almost laughed. She had been just as manipulated as I had. I could feel the irony in the air, thick and heavy. She had bought into Rick's lies, and now here she was, realizing she had been nothing more than a side act in his drama. I wasn't about to take the high road with her, though. "You should have known," I replied, my fingers dancing across the keys. "You're a grown woman, Sarah. You could have asked. You could have done better, but you didn't." I pressed send and immediately blocked her number. But the damage had already been done. The post had gone viral. It spread like wildfire, and in no time, Rick was being bombarded by texts, calls, and notifications. His friends started publicly distancing themselves. His family, they were silent at first, but I could feel the judgment growing. Then came the worst blow of all. His boss, Valerie, the very woman who had fired him after I exposed his infidelity to her. Valerie sent Rick a final email. No more warnings. She made it clear that she didn't tolerate people who couldn't be honest and loyal. He'd been caught in his lies, and now he was being cut loose from every avenue he had relied on to stay afloat. She had no room for someone like him in her company, and she made it clear that his unprofessional behavior would never be tolerated in her workplace again. Rick's fall from grace was swift. He couldn't hold on to his job anymore. His friends weren't calling. His family had turned their backs on him. His social media was flooded with people calling him out. He was a laughing stock, a man who had thought he could get away with everything, and now the world knew the truth. And me? I was finally free. I didn't need Rick's approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's validation. I was living my life for me now, building my own success. I didn't need to beg for attention or apologize for the things I had done. I had reclaimed my power, and I was going to keep moving forward, stronger than ever. But Rick, well, he was now exactly where I wanted him to be, at rock bottom. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.